across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and a good evening to you. It is Petrie here with you for the next 3 hours. And of course, coming up at midnight, it is your chance to talk back. And of course, the damning report on the Southport killer has now been, the first stage anyway, has now been released. And it shows so many failings. It is appalling. It is absolutely shocking, and I feel so heartbroken for those parents who must be looking at those failings and seeing just how many times Rudy Cabana could have been stopped before he carried out his evil slaying of their children on that day. It is an absolute disgrace. Everybody failed those three little girls. Everybody failed the families of those three little girls. Everybody in every step of the way failed. But the interesting question for me is, how much culpability do parents have for this sort of situation, for this sort of behaviour? And as I was just saying to Peter, we've seen a few cases now in America where the parents have been held responsible for their children carrying out things like mass shootings at schools, etc. And they have been held criminally responsible for that. And I just wonder if you think it is time, given the number of youths commit crimes in this country, if it's time we turn our attention to saying to those parents, if you do not control your children, if you do not keep an eye on them, if you do not check that they are leaving with knives or guns or whatever it is they may have on their person, then you, as the parent, will be held criminally responsible for their behaviour. I think it's a really interesting question, and maybe it would make more parents pay more attention to their children. 11, 12-year-olds, where are they? Well, I don't know, they've gone out. So maybe parents will be more keen on checking their children and checking their children's behaviour if they were to be held criminally responsible for any action that their child carries out. Like I said, it's happening in the US. Whatever happens in the US tends to happen here. So I just wonder if you think that that would be a good thing, or whether you think, well, actually some children are completely out of control, that they are completely not within their parents' control, and that the parents shouldn't be held responsible for their child's behaviour. I think parents have got some culpability in this. I genuinely do. I think that if you don't know where your kids are and you don't know what they're carrying, then you're not a very good parent. That's just what I think. So give me a call. I could be wrong. Maybe you can tell me you've got a kid that, you know, despite everything, you've got 3 children, 2 of them are angels and one of them is completely off the charts and you don't know what to do about them, and you don't think you should be held criminally responsible. But also, just looking at Rudy Cabana's parents, they didn't want to report him. He was making their lives a living hell. He was making the whole family's lives a living hell, but they didn't want to report him because they were afraid he would be arrested or taken into care. Now, that is something you can understand, but if you know your child is, I mean, that he was hoarding rice under his bed, he had knives, he had all sorts of things. Why didn't they know? And should they now be held responsible, at least in part, if not in whole, for what their son later carried out? So give me a call on that. I'd love to hear your views. 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at national rate, but we do call you back. And text the word talk and your message to 87222. I look forward to talking to you about that a little bit later on. Well, joining us in the studio to go through the papers is Vincent Moss, who's a former political editor. He'll be with us. Also with us, Timmy Alexis Carrington-Ward, broadcaster and host of the Here She Is show on YouTube, to take a look at the Olivier Awards, him having once been a board treader himself. And also, we're going to be heading to Hungary to talk to a journalist in Budapest to find out just what the mood is at the moment in Hungary, 24 hours later, and speaking to Scott Lucas to look at what this means for us, for Trump, for Ukraine, for Putin, and for the rest of the world. The toppling of this right-wing or this far-right authoritarian. So really interesting, I think, that is. But before we do any of that, the US has now decided to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, which was being blockaded by Iran, doubling down on the problem of getting ships through the Strait of Hormuz. It's now officially underway, according to timings outlined by Donald Trump after talks between the two sides failed at the weekend. Well, the US Central Command has warned ships that break the blockade will face interception, capture, or they may be eliminated, according to Trump's latest threats. What if it's a Chinese ship? I mean, it doesn't bear thinking about. Earlier, Iran's parliament speaker said that the country would not surrender under threat, and Prime Minister Keir Starmer has distanced the UK from the American position, ruling out participation in the blockade and instead pushing for a coordinated, independent, multinational coalition to restore freedom of navigation through the Channel. Well, Keir Starmer last Friday was in Qatar for peace talks regarding the war in Iran, and he spoke about the discussions he'd had the night before with US President Donald Trump.
We spent most of the time on the call talking about the practical plan that's going to be needed to get navigation through the Strait, and the role that the UK is playing. For a couple of weeks now, we've been pulling together a coalition of countries, now over 30 countries, working on a political and diplomatic plan, but also looking at military capabilities and actually the logistics of actually moving vessels through the Strait.
So that was Keir Starmer a few days ago, and 5 minutes is a long time in this new world. So let's catch up now with Ross Harrison, Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. and author of the new book, Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy, Strategic Interests, Power and Influence. Ross, it is really good to speak to you again. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Donald Trump was saying earlier on that Iran has been in touch. They phoned them directly and wants a deal. What do we make of that statement?
Well, I think the Iranians would like to have a deal, and I think the Americans would like to have a deal. I think the question is, it's a struggle for who has the most power to basically impose a deal as opposed to negotiate a deal. And I think what we saw at least at the end of the Islamabad negotiations was it appeared that the United States was dictating the terms rather than negotiating with the Iranians. And I'm not going to predict the future, but I can pretty much save your viewers the trouble of thinking about it. The Iranians are not going to submit or capitulate completely to the Americans because of this blockade. So, yeah, I'm sure there's a desire for diplomacy, but it has to be diplomacy where there's some willingness to have an off-ramp and get to some kind of real negotiation rather than the U.S. basically imposing its will on Iran. It's just not going to work.
And it's interesting because Donald Trump used his line that he used on Zelensky recently in saying they've got no cards. But they have. They've got the biggest card, and that is the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, they can overplay that. They certainly have the Strait of Hormuz, though the blockade makes it more difficult because it's going to be very, very difficult for the Iranians to get ships that originate in Iranian ports through the blockade. So I think the Iranians are going to feel some pain as a result of this, but so is the United States. It'll feel pain in terms of its gas prices, and it's going to feel pressure from the Europeans and from the Chinese and from other countries. So it's really at this point a battle of wills, Petrie, in terms of who's willing to basically move towards a serious negotiating posture first.
It's becoming clear, well, I wanted to ask you, is it becoming clear that the IRGC is in control of these talks?
I don't think it's fair to say the IRGC. Oh, you mean control from the Iranian side?
From the Iranians, yeah, from the Iranian side, as opposed to any Ayatollah.
Yes. Well, first of all, Petrie, let me say that even before this war, over the last 10 years or so, Iran has moved into the direction of becoming much more of a securitized state. led by the IRGC or dominated by the IRGC. And to some degree, we have Donald Trump to thank for that, not completely, but Donald Trump walked away from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018, and that sort of delegitimized or marginalized what we call the reformers in that government. So since that time, the hardliners or the IRGC has become much more dominant, even under Ali Khamenei, the late supreme leader. But now, for sure, under war, it's basically an IRGC securitized state. This is not about ideological leadership. This is about military securitized leadership, for sure.
And the other thing that I think has been underestimated is the asymmetric nature of the way Iran sets up its military, and how pockets of military can operate autonomously. That was the whole point of this. If there was an attack on the leadership, that these different areas could act in the best way they saw fit in the defence of the regime. Has Donald Trump underestimated that, do you think? Is he imagining a more central command, if you like, of the military?
Well, if he is still government is set up that way. So I think that if he underestimated that on February 28th, when he with Israel started this war, he should be disabused of that by now, because it's very clear the regime hasn't collapsed. If it was a highly centralized sort of wooden style structure, hierarchical top-down structure completely, the regime would have collapsed at this point. So it's the military and the political leadership. There's overlapping institutions. It's a heavily institutionalized system as opposed to a personalized system, a heavily securitized state as opposed to an ideological state. So if he's operating under the assumption that all he has to do is go one more mile in terms of military pressure and the regime will collapse, I think he's going to be waiting for a while.
Is Iran ever likely to give up the Strait of Hormuz? And if they did, could we be assured that they wouldn't take it again?
Well, remember, for the last 47 years, there has been an adversarial relationship since the Iranian Revolution between the United States and Iran, and they've never closed the Strait of Hormuz. There's been talk about it at times. They've never done that. They did this as an act of survival, frankly, a way to build leverage. You mentioned an asymmetry between the U.S. and Iranian military positions. Well, Iran has certain power, but they don't have the kind of kinetic or traditional military power the United States has. So they use the strait as a way to build, create compression and pressure on the United States. I think that what's important for Iran at the end of this war is that they have established that they can close the strait or put pressure on the strait at will. And also that they're able to derive some kind of revenue, whether it's through the release of frozen assets, whether it's sanctioned relief, or some kind of toll structure through the Strait of Hormuz. I think the money piece, the financial piece, is more important than how they do it. But I think at the end of this war, they will have, if they have established that they can close the Strait of Hormuz, and that's a risk, and that's a deterrent against future wars, then they've used the strait to their benefit. But if they try to overplay their hand and punish the entire globe for this over time, then the tide can turn against them. So I think they have to be very careful. But right now, they're not going to be careful because they believe that the United States is really not coming to the table and wants negotiations, but they want asymmetric negotiations where it's on the U.S. terms and not on the Iranian terms at all. And that's not going to get the Iranians to back away from the Strait of Hormuz or to negotiate any of the other terms that the U.S. wants.
Looking at the new blockade by the US, as I mentioned in my talk up to it, it's all very well to say we're going to stop ships, they're going to, suggesting a central command, saying they may be eliminated. But like I said, what if it's a Chinese ship? What if the Chinese decide that they're going to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz? I mean, that opens up a whole new region of pain.
It does, Petrie. I don't think they will. I don't think they have necessarily. I'm not a military analyst, but to my knowledge, they have one base there in Djibouti.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're going to necessarily send a ship to escort the ships out of the strait. But I think they will put significant pressure on the United States directly and through other countries, particularly in the lead up to the summit that Donald Trump is going to have with the presidency of China. At least it's on the schedule for the middle of May. So I think they have other types of pressure they can use to put pressure on Donald Trump other than just some kind of a military escort that I don't see happening.
But they're not going to be happy if those tankers are carrying Iranian oil through the Strait of Hormuz under a Chinese flag. The Americans have said they won't allow that. So my concern is what are they going to do about that?
Well, that remains. You probably need somebody that understands China better than I do that can tell you that. But I do think, of course, they're going to be unhappy. And remember, if this continues, the Iranians have the potential to activate the Houthis and close off
Red Sea.
or the Red Sea at the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb.
Yeah.
And that closes off Saudi, because Saudi has pipelines that go into the Red Sea. They can use that as an alternative route. If that one is compromised, then that puts pressure on our other allies. That could build on Donald Trump. And as you say, the Chinese, the Europeans, if this goes on for any length of time, and remember, it's not just not allowing ships through. I think given that this is now an active war zone, the question is, will any ship really go through there? Because remember, they need to be insured. Insurance rates, I think most ships that have gone through have been insured, but insurance rates have gone up. The risk premium has gone up. So I think it creates a whole host of economic and political issues that if it goes on for a period of time, I'm not sure that the U.S. has planned probably for the military contingencies, but I don't think they've planned for the economic and political contingencies that can ensue.
And just quickly, the GCC countries that are losing out now in millions, billions of dollars, if you like, and they're going to continue to do so if the strait isn't opened. Is that going to test relationships between those countries and America?
Well, Petrie, I just came back just a few days ago from Doha in Qatar to help cover the war there for several different networks. For one particular network, Al Jazeera. And one of the things that we talked about is what happens after this war in terms of relationships between those states and Iran, and those relationships, as you mentioned, the United States. And the question is, I think even if the economic interests are not further damaged on the part of the Gulf Arab states, I think what you're going to see, as furious as they are at the Iranians, I think they also, at some intellectual level, right now they're emotionally furious, but the intellectual level, I think they understand that it was the United States and Israel that basically waged this war, and that they were victims of the war, but they played no part in it. And I think at the end of the war, at the very least, depending upon when it ends, they're going to be revisiting their security paradigm. Now, they don't have too many options other than a security relation with the United States. But even within that context, there's a way they're probably going to be hedging and certainly rethinking their relationship, particularly the UAE perhaps, and Bahrain, rethinking their relationship with Israel. So I think at the end of the war, there's going to be a recalculation, reconfiguration, and on the whole range of relationships. And I think it depends on how much more economic damage is done between now and then, between now and the end of the war.
Yeah, but we could be looking at a very long time, unfortunately.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Ross, lovely to talk to you again. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. and author of the new book, Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy, Strategic Interests, Power and Influence. Ross Harrison there. Quick break. Back in a sec.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a good evening to you. This is Talk, and it's Petrie. And coming up at midnight, of course, it is your chance to talk back. And I want you to talk to me about the catastrophic failures by the parents of the Southport killer and various other agencies that were involved, meant to clear chances. They had clear chances to prevent the 2024 child murders, and they didn't do it. There's a lot of buck passing going on, as there always is in situations like this. The police and different agencies, and prevent all of them passing the buck. And this is phase one of this inquiry, has really pointed to an absolute list of catastrophic failures, really. But at the heart of that is that the parents knew that their child was off the charts and didn't do anything about it. The fathers even said, my love for him overrode what I knew to be true, my good judgment. So it's all very well him saying that, isn't there? But there are 3 little girls who are dead now, and parents of those little girls and families and friends of those little girls who will never be the same again, because the parents didn't do the job of parenting. And I mean, I have some sympathy with them, but the killer's parents had failed to act out of a misguided and irresponsible desire to avoid him being taken into care. Numerous systems that should have provided oversight, assessment and protection were ineffective or inadequately used, and some failed outright. And I don't know about you, but I am sick to my back teeth of, lessons will be learned. It literally makes my blood boil, because it's too late. Come on. So I want to know from you, if we started to make parents more responsible for the acts of their children, would that make a difference? I think it would. I genuinely do. If you said, right, your son has just done this, just stabbed another boy in the street, we're holding you responsible, love. You're being arrested, you're being charged, and you will go to prison. I wonder how many people would then sit up and take notice of what their children are doing. Maybe you think I'm naive, but I happen to think that parenting is a really hard job, and you've got to do it properly or don't do it at all. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Is it time we started to hold parents responsible for the acts of their children, the violent acts of their children? So give me a call on that. Look forward to talking to you about that. But on to happier news. Summer is on its way. And there's no better way of spending a sunny afternoon than at Wimbledon, and we are giving you the chance to be there. We have 2 VIP centre court tickets for Monday the 6th of July, and you could be there right in the heart of the action with the official Wimbledon debenture seats, plus enjoying exclusive access to the debenture lounge all day long too. If you're a Wimbledon fan, there's probably no better way of doing it. And here is how you could be in a chance to win.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 16th of April 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good evening. This is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you. Just a reminder that Timmy Alexis Carrington Ward is coming up in about 15 minutes' time to talk to us about the Oliviers, and then Vincent Moss at the top of the hour to go through the papers. But before all of that, in a political upset that has sent shockwaves from Brussels to Mar-a-Lago, Viktor Orban's decade-and-a-half grip on Hungary has finally shattered, and shattered it has. Yesterday's parliamentary elections saw Peter Maga and his TISA party sweep to a historic victory, securing a projected two-thirds supermajority of 138 of 199 seats, and forcing Europe's longest-serving leader into a rare concession. For years, Orban was the veto king of the EU, consistently and constantly blocking aid to Ukraine and stalling the bloc's common policies. He was very much Putin's man, Putin's mouthpiece in Europe. The result is also being read as a major proxy defeat for US President Donald Trump. Just days ago, Trump sent J.D. Vance to Budapest to support Orban with a lovely little private personal message from Donald Trump himself supporting Orban. Now, with Orban out, Trump also loses his most reliable bridge to Europe. Well, I thought, first of all, we should get a flavour of what's going on in Budapest. And Miller Cartwright, a journalist in Budapest, joins me now to give us the reactions from Hungary. Lovely to see you, Miller. Thank you so much for joining me. What is the mood like in Hungary?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Last night, it was absolute mayhem on the streets of Budapest, I have to say. People started gathering in the streets around 7 o'clock when the polls were closing, and then it started to fill up with nervous anticipation before, as things started unfolding, elation, ecstasy, chanting. So yes, it was a very exciting night last night and a wonderful thing to watch unfold. But today, everything has continued on as normal, it seems, because work continues, school continues, so everything has kind of moved forwards.
But do people feel, is it like a nice sunny day where people, you know, you can see people smiling at each other, even strangers? Is it that sort of feeling in Hungary?
It is. And, you know, the people walk into work today and go, did you see that last night? And there's that sort of sense of somewhat relief amongst people as well. I mean, there's also people in the country who are probably a bit nervous about what's next, but generally the atmosphere has been a very positive one to experience.
It is an interesting one, isn't it? Because Peter Maga was indeed working with Orban, right? And he broke away from Orban. So there will be some nervousness as to know how right-wing he's going to be, although I guess there's hope that he won't be as bad as Orban.
Yes, I mean, in the press conference today, there were a few questions which were trying to gauge where he stands on certain issues. And one of the things that he tried to make very clear was that he is going to be different from Orban. He is not the same person as Orban, and his policies and the way that he treats them will also be different. He did state that he is a conservative man, but at the same time that he respects the majority of Hungary's opinions and how they choose to behave. And so one of the things that he pointed out is the right to assemble be reinstated and to be able to represent people's values, and how people should not be afraid to express their opinions. And that is something that he wants to give back to Hungarians.
I mean, it was a massive turnout as well, and that in itself is incredibly exciting to see from a country where turnout has been getting lower and lower. And it just goes to prove, doesn't it, that if there's enough feeling behind wanting change, that every single vote counts. And Hungary came out and they voted overwhelmingly to rid Hungary of this authoritarian.
Absolutely. I think over the last few years, there's been a sense of apathy.
Yeah.
people feel disenfranchised with the system. Does my vote really matter? Is it really going to change anything? What is the point of even turning up for these things? But I spoke to people yesterday who before this had never been politically engaged, but this time were coming to the TISA rally with their own signs and, coming to show their support. And I think one of the sort of rhetorics that was being used throughout the run up to the election was this idea of fear, and can fear kind of crush this idea of hope? And as it seems, that is not the case. And that was something that Magyar really spoke about in his speech last night, about how fear is not going to control the majority. The majority can rise together, come together, and create a system of change.
Well, listen, congratulations. It was certainly very exciting to watch for us geeks in the UK. So congratulations, Mila. Thank you very much indeed. Mila Cartwright there, journalist in Budapest. Well, to discuss what the repercussions of this could be and will be for Putin, for Trump, for far-right parties across Europe, and for us here, let alone for Ukraine and for Hungary itself, is Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics and founder and editor of EA World View. Well, listen, last week, Scott, we were saying that we wanted some good news to talk about. This might be it.
Well, I officially have to remain neutral on the outcome of an election.
It's already done and dusted, but yeah, let's have a look at the repercussions of this then. What does this mean for Putin? Let's start with him.
I think the Kremlin's retrenching today, and it's actually interesting to watch their public comments in terms of what's happening. Initially, they came out and said like, okay, the elections were held, fine, we respect that, etc. And then just a few minutes later, the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said, "Oh, but I'm not going to congratulate Peter Magyar, the leader of the TISA party, which will now take 2/3 of the seats in the Hungarian parliament." And then later on today, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, who has been maintaining a hotline with Orban's foreign minister to get leaked confidential European Union documents and records of conversations. Sergei Lavrov comes out and says, well, we will work with the new Hungarian government if it acts in its national interest. And that phrase, if it acts in its national interest, is carrying a lot of weight there.
Well, they want them to continue buying the oil and petrol from Russia cheaply, don't they? They want the economic links, right? But they also want that political, basically, spoiler role that Hungary has within the EU, especially regarding Ukraine. They would like to see Hungary continue to raise objections to the EU 90 billion euro loan, which would finance Kyiv, the military and its financial needs through 2027. Now, Peter Magyar has indicated that Hungary will no longer stand in the way of that loan. Russia would like to try to change that. They would like Hungary to continue to block the next EU sanctions package, which would be the 20th. That's an important issue to watch. I don't think Magyar spoke specifically about that today. And they would like Hungary to block or slow Ukraine's accession to the EU. And there, I think they're on more solid ground in the sense that Magyar is saying, look, there's no acceleration. It has to go through the normal process with Ukraine, which other EU members favor as well. So I don't think that's a big, as it were, setback, the Magyar position there. But most importantly, you're absolutely right. They want to maintain the idea that here is an EU country that sees them as nice guys, right? And that's what Orban did. He was like, I'll go talk to Putin. You're showing the images on screen right now. What's so bad about him? What's so bad about this invasion? Because Orban could say that, and then we're going to move this discussion, I know, to Western Europe and the United States. You get pro-Kremlin activists in the US and in the UK and elsewhere. You say, well, look, there's this, Hungary's an EU member, and it says Putin's okay and that there's nothing wrong with the invasion. So nothing to see here, folks. But for now, you're not going to see a big, like, Russia waving its finger and saying, that's it, we're going to come after all of you. They're going to play it very cautious.
right now.
But I mean, Magyar has a lot to gain, doesn't he, from Europe in terms of financially as well, because of the sanctions and things and blockages and all of that. So they can, if you know, there's a bit of bargaining to be done there. He can say, well, look, release that money, what's 71 billion, and we'll do whatever you want.
Well, again, Magyar's going to have to be careful. Now, first of all, I think it's important to realize he is from, you know, he was in Orban's party. This is not like someone who's coming from the left. But he's got to be careful because although he differs from Orban on security issues, he called out Orban's corruption. So he's still got to play to the idea that of Hungary effectively, you know, is a proud country, is a national, that's, you know, is a country that does not bow down to Europe. You know, Orban took that to excess, but Magyar can't just simply say to the EU, tell us what you need us to do. So what you're going to have is in exchange for that release of billions of euros that have been held up because of Orban's abuse of rights, his abuse of the political and judicial system, is that Magyar is going to have to negotiate, but it has to be seen as a negotiation, not as a capitulation. And that means that I think you're going to see this being a very, you know, deliberative process. This won't happen overnight as we go forward.
What about what this does to Donald Trump? I mean, you know, because he endorsed Orban, he said he's his mate there, he's his great friend there. Will this knock Donald Trump a little bit, or will he just blame Vance? He say, well, if I went there, of course, he would have been voted in.
Don't look to Trump, look to Vance. Donald Trump is white noise here. Now, there's an important bit of background here that Orban, for more than a decade, has had links with the Trump camp. He actually sort of helped provide advice to Trump and their folks in, you know, in the run-up in the 2016 election. You saw a lot of Trump folks who went and courted Orban. Tucker Carlson, the American broadcaster before his fallout with Trump, had this big interview with Orban. Orban spoke at the the conservative big political action conference in the U.S. But it was Vance who, in Trump 2.0, has looked to Orban and other hard-right parties as being the parties both to advance what he sees as what he would call a nationalist agenda, whether you call it white nationalist, Christian nationalist, I leave it up to you. And also, Vance would see Orban and the others as part of the vehicle to undermine the European Union. So back in December of 2025, it was Vance and his people throughout the US administration that were really behind a national security strategy. And what did that national security strategy say? Europe is being overrun by non-whites, by immigrants. It faces civilizational erasure, all this great replacement theory. But what did it mean in practical terms? We support Orban. We support the AfD in Germany. We support the National Rally in France. Let it be said, they support the Reform Party in the UK. These were the type of parties where they want to deal with Europe bilaterally with each of these parties rather than with the EU. This is a huge setback for that approach.
And is it a setback for that type of politics? I mean, this was an overwhelming victory, but still, as you rightly point out, Peter Magyar was part of the Orban clan and has declared himself to be a conservative man. But what does this tell us about going further to the right?
I think what it tells us is maybe we need to have a check as analysts and journalists in simply reaching for the idea of this ideological hard right, sometimes extreme left, and sometimes reinforcing it through this. At the end of the day, what a lot of people want to see is they want to see delivery on key issues, right? So even when we supposedly had this swing to the hard right in Europe in the past few years, that's actually not the pattern if you go across Europe. Some countries have swung to the right. Some have stayed very much in the center. Few of them have actually gone center left if you go across the continent. What happened in Hungary were a couple of things that I think are remarkable, which are more useful. First of all, Orban and his party corrupt. I hope they can't sue us for that, so you can make that decision, but they were allegedly corrupt. Yeah. Hungary was, according to the Transparency Index, the most corrupt country in Europe, right? Economically, Hungary was sluggish and had been sluggish for some time. Now, when people feel your economy is not doing well and people in power are the people who are getting richer, Doesn't matter whether they're right, center, or left, there's a response against them. The issue here was going to be whether Orban could jimmy the system, as he has done in the past, to stay in power. And it was just too great for him to achieve it. But the second interesting thing in Hungary, and here I'm give credit to someone I worked with in Dublin, a young journalist named Blair Brandt, who wrote for my website a year ago. She said, look at what Tisza's doing in terms of using social media and compare it with the fact that Orban and the Fidesz party they're using old traditional media, the old state media outlets with TV and radio. And you folks at Talk know it's not just being there on TV and radio. You're out there on other social media channels as well. That's where a lot of young people were getting their entry point. And if you look at the images last night from Hungary, and I will be interested to see the breakdown in terms of by age where the vote went. But a lot of those photos were of younger people who were mobilized because Orban's traditional media channels no longer could, as it were, put its thumb on the scale of the election.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really interesting. I thought that was interesting too. And also that for a lot of these young people, they've only known Orban. So it was a really interesting swing. And let's wait and see how much of a profound change that this does make. But I have a feeling this is a moment in history. So thank you for joining me on it. Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics and founder and editor of EA World View. Quick break, back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it is Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. And still to come, obviously, we have Vincent Moss. He's going to be here at the top of the hour to go through the papers. And then, of course, it is Talkback. But right now, we're going to look at the Olivier Awards. That took place at the Royal Albert Hall in London last night. They are the sort of Oscars for the world of theatre, established exactly 50 years ago. Well, Paddington, the musical, dominated with 7 wins, including Best New Musical, and the top honours went to Rosamund Pike, Rachel Ziegler, and for their lead performances, while James Graham's Punch secured Best New Play. And we've got a clip here of Rosamund Pike when she was stopped and asked about her nomination. This is before she got the award, but this is what she had to say.
nominated is a miraculous, wonderful thing. I was in rehearsals for our West End transfer, and I couldn't understand why my phone kept buzzing. And I said, I'm so sorry, I don't know who doesn't know I'm in rehearsals. And I said, I'll just turn it off. And it was people texting because I'd been nominated for an Olivier, which was very special and was the last thing on my mind at that moment. So it was thrilling. The being nominated is the best bit, because as an actor you don't actually want to be singled out. You're much happier in a group. So a group of nominees is a very nice place to be.
Oh, so she didn't want to win? Not really. Well, joining me now is Timmy Alexis Carrington-Ward, who would have wrestled that award straight out of her hands if he could. Broadcaster and host of the Here She Is show on YouTube. Hello, Timothy.
Which you've been on. You've been on that, haven't you?
I have. I've yet to receive an award for it. But there you go.
I was going to say, you could have an Olivier Award for, well, your makeup artist, because you look quite nice tonight.
That's very kind of you.
Well done to her.
Very well done to her. She does a marvellous job. Listen, the Oliviers are... it always seems to be that it wasn't going to be put on telly because it's not everybody. This is about the West End, isn't it, really? And so the BBC haven't put it on telly for a while because it was seen as being a bit exclusive. But it was last night on BBC Two because of the 50th anniversary. But how important are the Oliviers to the world of theatre?
Firstly, they are going on the BBC now because they're being more respected, and it's becoming more like the Oscars. So that is a good thing, because actually for actors, it's, if you're in anything in theatre, people just think, they're not doing it anymore. But I think now praise is being given to all these theatre actors and things. That woman, you know, before, who
Rosamund
won Best
Pike,
Actress,
yeah.
That's her. Can you remember her from the James Bond? She was a Bond girl.
Oh, was she? I mean,
do you know what?
I love her. I think she's great. But it's very interesting to say, look, we're not very comfortable being singled out for an award. You'd think that they would love that spotlight.
I don't know what she means by that.
No.
I like being singled out.
Yeah, I know you do.
Actually. And actually, do you know what? I zoned out. What was your question?
How important are the Oliviers for the world of theatre? I mean, what does it mean when a show can put up Olivier winner? I mean, Paddington 7 wins from...
No, you did my job for me. You said it all, didn't you? So Paddington, yeah, they won Best Supporting Actress by, I have to mention this girl because she... Did you come with me to see Cinderella?
No.
So this girl played the stepmother in Cinderella, and I was... Cinderella didn't go down, Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical didn't go down very well, but she stood out as amazing. Victoria Hamilton Barrett, and I'm a big fan of her. So she won Best Supporting Actress in Paddington. We've got also the Best Supporting Actor was Tom Endon. We've got Best Set Design for Paddington, Best Costume Design, Best Director, and Best Actor, and Best Musical. I tell you what, as well, the Best Actor was won by two people.
I
because
know,
it's the voice.
That's unusual, right?
Well, it was the voice of Paddington and the lovely lady that was inside Paddington. So, oh, that sounds a bit rude. Inside the costume, yeah. Of Paddington.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about these two because it was an amazing bit of the night. It was lovely, actually. So Arta Shah is the lady in Paddington, and as she was thanking the audience, everything, they put the camera on her son, and he was, I mean, literally under the seat with embarrassment. He was only a little young boy. He must have been about 7, 8, under the seat. Completely under the seat, so embarrassed. But her speech was really lovely. That she was a, I don't know what the correct word is for a small person.
That'll do.
Yeah. And she was just basically saying she loves this to show what people can do, which is amazing. And that was so lovely. And then the guy, James Hammond, who is the voice of Paddington, did a lovely, lovely speech, because he was saying about how it's all kindness, and he's come over into this country following his dad. his dad was Indian and came over, and his dad, it's in the audience, just like clapping him and everything. And it was a bit of a well-up time. It was really lovely. That was a really lovely bit.
A lot of people are saying that Paddington's done so well because in a really gloomy world that we live in at the moment, it is a nice, fun musical.
And family friendly. Although I did have a call tonight after somebody saw I was coming on here, and they said they've got a little girl, that they were going on about how everything all be kind, but the tickets are so expensive for a family. So she was like, how kind are you going to be?
Yeah, well, that's a really good point, actually. And does winning an award like this, or at least 7 awards like this for a musical like Paddington, does that encourage them to put the prices up? Does that make them a little bit more greedy? I mean, these are things that are expensive to put on, right?
Yeah,
they are expensive.
This is from Word Go. You can look it up now and you'll get a ticket. You can get a ticket for £25, or the top tickets. Do you want to guess how much a top ticket is? Let's have a little guess.
150 quid.
£228. So just 2 of you.
Whoa.
That's a Carol Vorderman amount.
That's out of the pocket of families, isn't it? Why are they so expensive?
Well, look at all their awards they've won. Like
Yes. Yeah.
And all of that. That is why, because they're getting the top dollar there. But do you know when you can get a ticket for it now, Petrie Hosken?
No.
You can get a ticket for it because you're asking how it affects the show and everything. You can get your next ticket next January.
It's completely sold out.
It's worth getting an award, isn't it, Petrie? You want to get an award for this show, darling. People might watch it.
I know. That would make the difference. So it is literally sold out until January.
I had
even at those prices?
Yeah, friends that went and said, I am going to love it. So I'm a bit missed out on it because of this Victoria Hamilton Barrett, who's after the bear in it. But she's so amazing, apparently. But the show is meant to be really, really good. It's... Here's a thing. Would you rather go on a holiday or go to the theatre? Because it's holiday prices, isn't it?
It really is.
I've just been to LA, and I could have had that. If I was taking a family to see that show, I could have had my holiday, a luxury holiday.
I mean, I don't know how people do it, but I suppose they will then. So some people will spend that money on a meal, I guess, if they've got the money. So they'll go and see.
Not so much you these days, have you? Not so much you these days, because you're right thin.
Thank you.
You're not as curvy as you used to be, are you?
That's very kind of you to say. I think. To say that.
I have a sting in the tail.
I know you do. I know exactly what you're saying as well. But let's have a look at some of the other things, because I mean, I suppose the Olivier's, what it does do is it does highlight what's going on in the West End.
Yeah. We had
lots of different types of shows.
We had 5 numbers in it. We had Evita, Shucked, Phantom of the Opera, The Producers, and Wicked were all performed. And on that front, the Lifetime Recognition Awards, that's it, went to Elaine Page.
Oh.
Dame Elaine Page. So she was sat out there having to watch Evita being sung to her by Rachel Zeglen.
Yeah, well, we've got
the one that sang out on the balcony.
We've got a clip of that I just want to show, because she was really chuffed about being able to do this 8 times a week to people in Argyle Street, which is West End Street. So here she is, her balcony performance of Don't Cry For Me, Argentina.
All you have to do is look at me to know that every word
So there you go. That was a bit of genius, wasn't it, on behalf of the producers and the directors?
We spoke about it on your show.
Yeah,
they were doing that.
Because every night that part of the show was sung out on the street and shown in the theatre on a screen.
Yeah, what you didn't see there was that was the night we went, because it's just off the bar, and we were on the other side, on the corner, having a few sherries. Did you see it?
We were there.
We went out after her, didn't we, and had a few songs on the balcony.
Yeah, we tried to replicate
You sang My Old Man, said Follow the Band, didn't you?
Cleared the crowds.
I was singing Get This Party Started. Yeah, we had to do that. That was our job, to clear the crowds away after she had sung.
And we did it.
And you did it very well, Petrie.
Thank you. Yeah, anything, my singing will clear anything.
But she sang that in front of Elaine Page, who originated Evita in the musical. So that was a bit.
Well, she won an award for it, didn't she? Best.
She was best
actress in a musical. In a musical.
But what I'm saying is, Elaine Page was sat there like that, and I was the same with my other half, going, "What about? Oh, she's doing it that way, is she?"
Not how I would have done it, but anyway.
Oh no, I wouldn't have done that.
But Rachel Ziegler was saying that she loved that part of the show, and that people would gather there. We were there accidentally. We weren't gathered there for we just accidentally saw it.
By accidentally. It was just near a pub we were at.
It was just near a pub that we were at, exactly. But I mean, a really clever thing for a theatre to do, to open up to the public like that and get that publicity in.
That was the same director that had directed Sunset Boulevard before, when she had him walking around the theatre. So they've done that just before that. That's a new sort of thing coming on the block.
It's brilliant. Timmy Alexis Carrington Ward, thank you very much indeed. A broadcaster and host of Here She Is.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a very good evening to you. It is Petrie here with you, and coming up in an hour's time, of course, it is your chance to talk back. And now that we've had stage one of this report on Axel Rudakabana, the 17-year-old who killed those three little girls, B.B. King, Elsie Stancombe and Alice De Silva Aguirre, he murdered them, of course, when they were at a little girl's dance class back in 2024. This phase one of the inquiry has just shown how flawed the entire system is. Yet again, you know, the whole lessons will be learned, which is just drives me nuts. But lots of people passing the buck, downgrading their own involvement in the situation in Axel Rudakabana, who was a very troubled teenager. But they also, Sir Adrian, also criticised the parents, his parents, obviously, saying that they should have done more. And it's hard to see that there is any other conclusion, really. Although the County Council of Lancashire, elements of children's social care, youth offending services and broader multi-agency approach all had their part to play on it, but it does start at home. So I wonder, we've seen it in America now, it's starting to become much more commonplace in America, that the parents are being held criminally responsible for the violent acts of their children, especially when it comes to school shootings and things like that. We've seen a couple of cases now where the parents have been held criminally responsible for their children, not locking away their guns properly, or not noticing the decline in their kids, not listening and not paying attention. All of those things which have enabled these children to carry out these acts of violence. And Sir Adrian had no doubt at all in suggesting that the parents had their part to play in this, and how that they had allowed this to happen. Sir Adrian said if the parents had reported their true level of knowledge to the authorities before the attack, the killer would undoubtedly have been taken into care at that point and held in custody. Rudakabana had been making his mother and father's lives a nightmare, and giving the evidence in the inquiry last year, his father tearfully apologised and said he regretted not contacting the police about his own son following a range of troubling incidents in the months and weeks before the attack. He said, "The love I had for him overrode my good judgment." But they failed to act. And because they failed to act, 3 other sets of parents lost their children in the most violent and unnecessary way when their son murdered them. So I'm asking the question, really, whether it is time that we started holding parents criminally responsible for the violent acts of their children. That we've got a lot of youth crime in this country. We hear stabbings all the time, not just in London, but all around the country. And kids going to schools with knives and things like that. It is hard to imagine that parents properly parenting wouldn't have noticed that behaviour in their children. And maybe if we did start holding parents criminally responsible for the violent acts of their children, they would pay more attention to whether their children were going to school with knives or hanging around with the wrong sorts, or even keeping a machete under their beds. Rudakabana had ricin and plans under his bed. I just don't know how that is even possible for parents not to notice that. So I'd love to hear from you whether you think it would make a difference. Do you think it would make a difference if parents were held responsible? And I know there's going to be some people who say, well, I don't know, you know, we shouldn't really hold other people responsible for other people's actions. But this is different. This is a relationship between a parent and a child, and you do know what's going on. I knew what was going on mostly in my son's life. Particularly, I would know what was under his bed. It was usually crisp packets and dirty plates, to be honest, because I spent half my life clearing them out because we'd run out downstairs. But I'm sure, I'm certain I would have known if he'd got a machete, or I just don't believe that parents can just wash their hands of their children's behaviour. I really don't. They are your responsibility. As a parent, you are responsible. So I wonder if you agree with that, or whether you think that it would be impossible to blame the parents, and you shouldn't blame the parents. Maybe you've got two kids who are angels and one that's just completely off the charts. You don't know what's wrong with you. You don't know why they behave in the way that they do. They just do, and you don't believe you're responsible because your other children are angels. So I'd be really interesting to hear what you think of this, and whether you think that if we did hold parents criminally responsible, would it change the landscape of youth violent offending? Give me a call. 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at national rate, but we do call you back. And text the word talk and your message to 87222. So that damning report there, the first stage, a 760-page final report following phase 1 of the inquiry. Well, joining me to discuss this and to look through the papers is Vincent Moss, a former political editor. Vincent, it's happening in America that parents are now being held responsible when they're not taking care of their children to a degree that they don't notice what's going on with them. Do you think it could change the landscape a bit here if we did the same?
Well, I hope so. I mean, and I think it's something that needs to be thought about very seriously. I mean, I see Merseyside Police have said that they won't be taking action and bringing charges against the parents in this case. And if ever there was a case that you probably think needed it, it would be this case, because it wasn't a marginal call. He wasn't misbehaving and shoplifting and going off the rails. I mean, he seriously wanted to hurt people. His father had to stop him going into school once before and hurting people. As you say, had a machete, had rice in. Now, the parents, to be kind to them, they presumably wanted to keep him out of the care system, so they obfuscated, as the report says, and they tended to sort of mislead social workers and care workers.
They lied.
Because they did, really, because they wanted to keep him out of the system, and that's the common way now. I mean, we used to jail, I think it was about 3,000 young people were in jail, effectively, in detention, young people's detention. That's now down to about 500, and the modern thinking is, let's keep people out of the system, especially young people, because they just, once they're in for life, and they're always going to reoffend. That bit makes sense, but there are some people you just got to take a view on. They are so evil and so violent that it's for theirs and society's good that they are locked up, and this would appear to be a case like that. And the parents really let society down. It wasn't just the 3 young girls who were killed and their families. There were many other young children who were severely injured. Everybody involved was traumatised.
Yeah.
So it affected dozens and dozens of people, really, once you include all the relatives and family. And all of that could have been avoided, potentially, if the warnings had been acted upon, and critically, if the parents had done what was described, I think, in the report as their moral duty, and basically called on the authorities and said, look, we can't handle him. You're going to have to lock him up.
Yeah. And it would have, those other parents, I mean, you just think your heart breaks for them, doesn't it, of those little girls. Reading this report and just seeing how many ways they were let down. But like I said, Vincent, it all starts with the people closest to him, and that is the parents. And the police also, at one point, they found him on a bus with a knife, and they didn't arrest him, they didn't charge him, and just sent him home. So there were, but even that, the parents knew all the accumulated facts about their son. And at some point, like you said, you've got to say, we can't handle this.
Exactly. And the bit of the report we expected was that the various different departments didn't communicate very well, and that's often a claim and a criticism that's made, and people always say we'll do better and we'll all talk to each other. But the job of those hard-pressed, probably overstretched care workers and local authority people and teachers was undermined by the fact that people who knew most about this basically sat on their hands, as it were, the parents, and didn't say how severe the problem was, and made it difficult for people to get to the root of the problem.
Exactly.
So really, the parents are sort of front and centre of where when the blame is being apportioned. And the retired High Court judge, who I think it was Sir Adrian Fulford, who came up with this 760-page first stage report, he lays the blame pretty much everywhere, but very squarely and very importantly on the parents.
Yeah, that was, for me, that was interesting because you don't often hear that. But because they, you know, obfuscated, didn't tell the truth, played down his behaviours at home and what he'd already done before, and all of those things. So he was making their life a living hell, but they would have said no, it's because he has autism. It's just autism. You know, he's difficult because of autism. Where they knew, they really did know that he had violent tendencies, violent thoughts, and clearly they just hoped, fingers crossed, that he wouldn't act that out. And of course, he did in the most brutal way.
Exactly, and I think that's the part about it is the bit of them, if you like, and they must be questioning their own consciences, where they thought that it would all just presumably go away, or it could be dealt with, or they could blame it on his autism, which, by the way, is very unfair on the many parents who've got autistic children and dealing with that, and there's no direct read across, it's important to stress, between the child having autism and this sort of appalling violence and behaviour. But I think it's really the parents in this case who just didn't act, didn't tell the police, and they must have known how this could have ended, because it wasn't as though he didn't have a machete at the home. It wasn't as though he didn't have rice in at home. So you could see it wasn't sort of a bit of bad behaviour and they hoped he'd come back on side. He was really very, very seriously evil and seriously ill, and he needed locking up for everybody's good, not least his own. And there's, you know, even if he'd been locked up, he presumably would have got some kind of treatment that he wasn't getting, and it may never have happened. And that's the point the judge makes. So parents have got an awful lot of questions to answer. And yes, there are other sort of systemic learnings, as there always are in these things, but really it's the parents who seem to need to shoulder an awful lot of the blame for this.
Yeah, and like I said, that's what's happening in America. And there's been cases where the parents go, well, we didn't know. There's that one who bought him a gun even, who's just been sent down for it. But just saying, oh, well, we didn't think it was that bad, it's just not good enough, is it? I mean, like I was saying, as parents, you are responsible for your children. I mean, although there's a criminal age of responsibility of 10 in this country, it's one of the youngest in the world, it's still the parents must know, or must be held, I think, because then they'll pay attention more, maybe.
And your instinct as a parent, absolutely, and your instinct as a parent will be to protect your child and stop them going into care, stop them going to jail. And I'm sure lots of parents do that all the time, may even cover for their kids to ensure they don't get into trouble with the police. How far do you go? And there must be a line, and wherever that line is, this particular offender was a million miles over that line, and they clearly should have taken much stronger action than they did, and they didn't.
I always said to my boy, you break the law, I'm dobbing you in.
Yeah.
I mean, I never needed to carry that threat out, but I always, that's the line. If there's a law broken, you don't get my protection.
Yeah, and I think
whether I would have done, I don't know.
Yeah, and a lot of parents have always said that as an early shock to somebody, whether it's sort of taking them to police because they've been shoplifting to get a caution, keeps them on the straight and narrow in a way that if you don't act, then children don't carry on misbehaving. So, and there's no perfect way of parenting. And obviously parents should look after their kids and try and protect them. But when they're breaking the law, especially this course of action was clearly going to end in some kind of tragedy. Maybe not as bad as what happened, but it was going to end very badly, and they really needed to have acted, and they didn't.
And all the stuff that he was searching as well, and all of that adds to a fuller picture of how disturbed Rudy Cabana really, really was. And his parents knew that he was disturbed. And I can't square that circle.
They did, and that's, I suspect, why they really don't want to say much more than they've said, because they realise the error of their ways. And I'm sure that if you asked them, they would have done things differently if they'd known it was going to end up like this, but they didn't.
It's so, I mean, look, as a parent, you do want to protect your children, but also you need to protect other people's children as well, and they didn't do that. So that's the phone in at midnight. Do give me a call, 03444 991 1000. Send a message to, text the word talk, and then your message to 87222. Quick break for me and Vincent, back in a sec.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and a good evening to you. This is Talk and it's Petrie, and with me is the fabulous Vincent Moss, former political editor. The Sun newspaper, Vincent, going with the story we have just been discussing, actually. They didn't have to die. The killer's parents slammed in the report and girls failed by cops and authorities. It really was the most shocking thing, wasn't it? Do you remember when it happened?
It was. It doesn't seem like it was 2 years ago, but that's when it happened. It was July 2024. And the Sun, again, refers to the girls being failed by the police and the authorities. And it makes the point, the parents were slammed in the report too. Yeah. So everybody pretty much was to blame. And as ever, all the authorities come out and say, well, we'll learn lessons from this. But
that really drives me nuts. They said not only were their deaths predictable, but they were also preventable. I mean, to say it was predictable is just horrendous for the parents of these little girls. Yes. And like you said, the many that were injured and the trauma that they will live with for the rest of their lives. The Times newspaper, that Trump rolls the dice on blockading the strait. President tells Iran to allow tankers safe passage. This is just upping the ante, it would seem, with a country who've said that they're not going to give in to threats.
Yeah, he's trying to get the Strait of Hormuz opened on Trump.
Closing it.
By closing it, and now effectively saying that if you think you can get past the Iranians, you've also got to get past us too. So if the Iranians don't get you, then the Americans will. The blockade essentially, I think, is aimed at putting pressure on Iran because Iran is letting the tankers of oil it has to China going through, and I think it's putting the squeeze a bit on China and Iran and saying we're going to stop those tankers going through. And at the moment...
But this is what I've been asking, Vincent, all this blah, blah, blah. The real repercussions of this, is CENTCOM, Hexeth, really going to bomb a Chinese tanker?
No.
No. Right. So what's the point in saying it? Do you know what I mean? Because if it's a Chinese tanker that's going through, and those are fundamentally the tankers that have been going through, they're saying you can't go through because that's Iranian oil. It's all very well blah, 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 but what do you actually do when you're faced with a full Chinese tanker going through the Strait of Hormuz? What do you do? That's the question for me, because China won't. They're not going to be happy about it. They're not going to capitulate. Are they going to board a Chinese tanker? No.
They're not. And where you've ended up really is a stalemate as far as it seems as though at the moment pretty much nothing is going through. Because if you're not worried about the Iranian fast boats coming out and targeting them, you're potentially a bit worried about the Americans. We don't know what's being said over the intercoms to these ships' captains, and various threats are being made. But the stalemate still exists. 20% of the world's oil goes through that narrow bit of water. None of it really seems to be moving. Trump is saying that the Iranians are ready to talk, but he seems to say that every day. He's saying it again today that they're ready to talk.
They've called him, which is...
could mean anything, but it seems to be reassuring the stock markets, which have moved a little bit up again, which tends to suggest they think a resolution is near. On the upside, doesn't appear as though there's any actual missile strikes and bombing, so the ceasefire is fragile but holding. But the critical part in terms of the UK and world economies, which are really about to hit the deep freeze if nothing happens.
And the GCC countries that are losing billions through all of this because their oil can't move.
And the oil's still not moving. So, I mean, the blockade came into force pretty much at 3 o'clock UK time. And they've said that any vessel, the Americans have said any vessels entering or departing the blocked area without authorisation is subject to interception, diversion and capture. Well, let's see if that happens.
It's not... I'm just waiting for that first Chinese tanker to go through. They're not going to risk upsetting Xi. But then there's so many times that you get this bluster from America, but the follow-through... the consequences of any follow-through are just so appalling Or are they going to board a Chinese? No.
They're not.
Are they going to stop a Chinese tanker? They might try and divert. But no. What are they going to do then? They're going to look stupid.
No, the reality is the insurers are not insuring any boats at the moment, any ships at the moment, and quite understandably so. So you've still got these hundreds of tankers and various other craft that are just stuck there, and very little sign of anything changing, other than Trump popping up every day saying that the Iranians allegedly are talking to him, which we don't know whether it's true or not.
No, we don't. And it's really interesting, isn't it, that we question everything that comes out of America as much as we question everything that's coming out of Iran, but you would imagine that we would believe America. The other American story, which we've got to address because it is on the front page, is this absolutely extraordinary image of Donald Trump as Jesus Christ healing the sick. He said that he thought it was just a picture of a doctor because he supports the Red Cross. Really? That I am not buying when there's angels and, you know, all these images. And it does look like, there you go, it's on the screen now. It does look like he's healing Jeffrey Epstein. I'm just saying. I don't know. Look, it could be. But to say that he thought that was the image of a doctor because he supports the Red Cross.
It's nuts, isn't it? I mean, doctors look like doctors. This looks like a Jesus-style
holding a glistening
picture.
orb.
Exactly. It doesn't look anything like a doctor. If it was a doctor, you put a stethoscope on or a face mask or something. And Trump's quoted as saying, it's supposed to be me as a doctor helping make people better. And I do make people better. I make a lot of people better.
What, by removing their health care? In the US.
Exactly.
That's really helpful.
And this all comes at pretty much the same time he's refusing to apologise for calling the Pope very weak after the Pope made statements opposing the war in Iran.
Yes, how dare the Pope, the head of the Christian church, talk about peace? I mean, seriously. And he said he's not very good at foreign policy. He's not a politician. He's not meant to be good at foreign policy.
No, but it just so seems
politics.
But just when you thought he couldn't go beyond his last statement on social media, he does something else. And he also, interestingly, he said something, I don't know who the Pope's brother is, but he said he preferred the Pope's brother to the Pope.
Because he's a MAGA, apparently.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, what an insult to... I'm not religious, and even I can see that is insulting. And doesn't the Bible talk about a false prophet? Yeah. The coming of the Antichrist, you know, that they will proclaim themselves to be a prophet. Well, that looks very similar to what... And he posted that. He posted that.
And it would be a scandal in any other time, but you just know that within 24 hours there'll be another scandal and we'll have forgotten about this scandal because the other one will be weirder and more different to today's.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're just getting inured to this now, aren't we? We're just getting cold to it. The other story is, do the wash on a weekend and get free electricity. Households will be offered free electricity to do their laundry on a sunny weekend to help prevent Britain's power grid being swamped with surplus solar energy this summer. I could be persuaded to do my wash at the weekend.
Yeah, you could, and this is something that they've talked about before. This is the National Energy System Operator, NESO, body responsible for keeping the lights on. Now, the good side is you do it at off-peak times, you might get a discount, you might get cheaper electricity. But it's also to do with balancing the grid and making sure that we don't get blackouts, because they are worried about power surges in the summer with unequal amounts of supply. So there could be all sorts of... I think you probably need a smart meter for this to work, though, potentially. That's one of the other things, usually. But they're just looking at ways of trying to balance out how the grid handles the power we use. And one of the ways of doing that is households could get cheaper deals for running appliances off-peak. Well, we get lots of other things cheaper off-peak, don't we? Flights and various other things.
They like to do this surge pricing on us, so why don't we get it cheaper? I mean, most people probably do their washing at weekends, don't they? They're working during the week.
I think so. But
I do mine on a Thursday, in case you're interested.
Yeah, but there's a suggestion it could be cheaper on a Sunday. Makes sense. I mean, I guess people do it at different times. Yeah. I mean, the weird one would be if you live in a flat and they suddenly say it'll be cheaper if you do it after midnight. I can see that going down very badly.
Really do well, yeah. As long as the tumble dryer doesn't go on afterwards, you'd be all right. Right, so let's have a look at the Star before. There's a very, very good headline on the Star. Again, it's this picture of Donald Trump cosplaying Jesus. It's the only way you can look at it. and the headline is, "You're not the Messiah, you're a very naughty boy," which is from The Life of Brian, one of my favourite films.
It is, and it's a brilliant headline. But do you know what year The Life of Brian was?
Oh, God, don't tell me.
1979.
Ooh.
So I do think, and I know newspaper readers tend to be a bit older, but you have to be quite old potentially, or at least been very young when you saw the film. So,
but there's got to be Python fans.
That's true.
You know, who'll watch. I mean, it was a brilliant. I remember going to see it.
And a brilliant line.
I went to see it at the cinema, and there was people outside complaining about it. You know,
yes,
protesting
it was banned,
about
wasn't
it. It was banned by some. But when we went in there, there was a pre-film, a film before. In those days, you used to get a little short film before the main feature, and it was on gondolas. And we all sat there because that's what normally they were, really boring films. And so we all just sat there. I was a kid and my dad was there, and then suddenly this bad language, because it was a Python Mickey take of the type of film that was put on before. And not every theatre got that, not every show's seen that. So if you were one of the people who saw the gondola movie, it was so funny, it was so rude and so funny. It started off really boring and really like, oh, here's a gondola in Venice and it's the gondoliers, and then it turned into a Python-esque rampage about how annoying gondolas were. It was very good. And then the film itself was brilliant, but I remember the protests.
Yes, I think it was. I grew up in Sussex, and I have a feeling it was banned in some of the cinemas in Sussex because it was very seen as blasphemous at the time, wasn't it, by some people, and there were complaints.
But it was Brian.
But it's funny because the Star headline, it doesn't actually make any reference to where that comes from. So it's a very not that in joke, but if you know the film, you get it straight away.
Yeah,
but if you don't know
it, it doesn't really mean anything. But yes, you're not the Messiah. You're a very naughty boy. Right, let's take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good evening to you. It's Petrie, and with me Vincent Moss, former political editor, and the Daily Express now hold them to account for their moral failure to act. Again, as the Southport victims' families hear that the attack would be highly likely not to have happened if the killer's parents had spoken up. So, I mean, the phone-in tonight is right on the money. They're saying that the parents should be held to account for their moral failure to act.
Well, I think they're right, aren't they? And the Express quotes the family solicitor who said of the family, excuse me, he'd not left the house for 2 years. This is the killer, except when armed or seeking to cause harm.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know.
That's all you need to know. And it is interesting that now that the papers are now calling for the parents to be held responsible. And I don't think we're far away from that, you know, Vincent, after what we've seen in America with those parents. And I think those parents rightly were held responsible in America for their lax behaviour around guns and the threats and the violence from their children. And I don't see why it shouldn't apply here. I really don't. But it's interesting to see the papers actually calling for that now.
Yeah, and it will reopen the debate about social media because he was a huge consumer of extremely violent videos that he had free access to at home. and it'll just reopen that whole debate about what age should children be able to see and access free violent stuff on the internet.
Yeah, really. I mean, just really horrendous stuff. The Daily Telegraph, Trump repents his Jesus stunt. He doesn't repent his Jesus stunts. The president deleted the post saying he thought it was a doctor that he was putting up, just at the same time he's trying to have a row with the Pope. Do we believe in coincidence? No.
It's remarkable, isn't it? I mean, not content with waging war in the Middle East, effectively in the Gulf, he's taking on the whole of the Catholic Church, effectively criticising the leader of the Catholic Church. Not bear in mind a figure in terms of the Pope who's revered by millions across America, so as the leader of their faith. So how that would have gone down with them, and must have gone down incredibly badly. And yet it's an image, you know, where he's, as you said earlier, holding a glowing orb in one hand, touching a sick man's forehead with the other, emitting beams of light. There's the Statue of Liberty, fireworks, a fighter jet, angels and eagles.
Somebody praying. There's a young woman praying there as well. I mean, of course it's a religious image.
Yeah,
of course it is. But then his religious people in his cabinet have already likened him to Jesus. They've already likened him to Jesus. They're just like Jesus. Trump has had, you know, somebody tried to kill him, and you know, he's had, you know, lots of issues with people, and then so the far right nationalists, the Christian nationalists, have already likened him to Jesus. So it's only a small step for him to liken himself to Jesus, surely.
Well, exactly. And even the style of the AI creation, it's in that kind of iconography that you get in religious sort of stores whenever you go and visit one of these places where they're selling sort of cheap souvenirs, if you like, and it's in that style. The whole thing is clearly meant to make him look like Jesus. So why he's rowing back on it? He's only rowing back on it because, like so many of these things, it's got him into trouble, and he's just rowing back a bit until he creates his next bit of mayhem.
Next bit of mayhem, like when he did that meme of him flying an aircraft, dropping excrement on people protesting him.
Yeah.
So that's just...
But these always create a story. There was the one about turning the Gaza into Las Vegas.
Oh yeah.
So this AI, whoever's doing his AI artwork, presumably perhaps he just feeds it into one of the bots and gets these suggestions.
Well, there was
and
the other one as well, where he portrayed President and Mrs. Obama as gorillas or monkeys. Yeah. It's just, and he said, "Oh, it was just the Lion King." Oh, really? Come on. Anyway, that's the Telegraph there saying that he has repented. He hasn't repented at all. But the nibs at the bottom here, the news in brief. Interesting little article here. Scrapping jury trials betrays Labour's values and will endanger the criminal justice system. Sir Keir Starmer's mentor has warned. But of course, somebody's lost the whip over that, haven't they, by standing up against the changes to the criminal justice system?
Yes, Carl Turner, a Northern Labour MP who's also a legal eagle, he's lost the whip over it, and there's a sort of growing swell of opposition to this, and it's going to be sort of yet another problem for the government.
They're going to have to U-turn on it.
It feels like there's a strong opposition, although the rebellion among Labour backbenchers is not quite as high as perhaps it needs to be. But it does feel as though...
Because he keeps removing the whip from anybody who disagrees with him.
Well, exactly. And also a lot of the people that are now coming out against it, including Geoffrey Robinson, who's the latest highly placed sort of legal expert to come out against it, they're all part of Sir Keir Starmer's North London set of human rights lawyers and barristers, so it's not like something that won't be touching quite close to home in his case. Yeah,
well, it is. I just think it's a huge mistake for everybody if that does go through. I just can't see it getting. I have my doubts about whether the Lords will let it slide, or you know, whether. I just can't believe that such a monumental change could be made after 800 years of legal history in this country.
Yeah, especially when there are other ways of clearing the backlog, not least by getting courts to sit longer,
and opening
up more courts and things like that. So
exactly.
there are other ways around it, which some barristers are pointing out. And also, Labour has so many problems at the moment, and it seems like a fight that it may not want to have.
No, exactly that. Right, the Mirror again. This fight does not end today. Young victims' parents. That's BB, 6 years old. Elsie 7 and Alice 9. Young victims' parents vow to battle for change after report finds killer's family and authorities could have prevented the deaths. That's got to be the worst thing ever, hasn't it? To know that it could have been prevented.
Absolutely, and the Mirror describes Rudy Cabana as violence obsessed, which I think is quite a good way of just making how clear this wasn't a sort of
this wasn't a moody teenager. Yeah. This was something very, very different. The Guardian, catastrophic failures by the state led to Southport attack, inquiry finds, and the Pope is saying that he's not afraid of Donald Trump, and he is going to keep speaking out against war. Why pick a fight with the pontiff? I don't get it. I mean, he's saying basically, he said that he can't agree with the Pope that wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Well, the Pope has never said that. The Pope has never said, give Iran a nuclear weapon. I don't agree with criminal defence. I don't agree with law and order. He's never said any of those things, but Trump is quoting him as having said those things. It's outrageous.
Well, exactly. He's also sort of doubled down by suggesting that the Pope is weak on crime. Well,
he's not a police officer or a politician.
No, he's not. And also, popes, by their nature, tend to want peace rather than war. Yeah. So he's not even doing anything controversial. He's just being what you'd expect a Pope to do, which is urge everybody to sort of get along and be peaceful. So to pick a fight, I mean, of all the people as a politician, I would have thought you pretty much... Alistair Campbell famously said of Tony Blair at the time, we don't do God, and there's a reason.
Yeah, there's a reason we don't do God.
Tend not to pick fights with pontiffs and clergy in general. It doesn't end well. And there's, I think, is it 60 million Catholics in America? So why would you want to potentially alienate, especially when your personal ratings are tanking and you've got the midterms looming in a few months? Why would you want to pick a fight with the Pope?
It is quite extraordinary, isn't it? But the Pope said he's not going to be cowed by it, but he won't visit America.
Well, I mean, can you blame him at the moment?
He
probably
is
will
American.
visit, but not under this president, I suspect.
Yeah, and he said that Trump said, well, he's only Pope because I'm president, so they decided to give it to an American. I don't think that's how it works.
No, it isn't.
In the enclave.
No,
I'm not sure that's how it works. But anyway, it's all about Trump, isn't it? So he's only got his being Pope because of Trump being president, but it still doesn't detract from
Surely
that.
he wants to meet the Pope and cut a deal like he wants to cut a deal with everybody else. Maybe he can get a good deal in the afterlife.
In the Vatican. If he knew how much gold there was in the Vatican, he might even be planning to take the Pope out.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and take over the Vatican like he's done with Venezuela.
And turn it into a casino.
Yeah, possibly. But they've got an awful lot of money in the Vatican.
Yeah.
UK passengers abandoned at EU airports in chaotic new Brexit checks. Well, we voted to leave the EU, so we need to be checked when we go in and out of the EU. And some people are not making their flights, though, because of this chaos. But how do you feel about it?
Well, it's terrible, really. As you say, we voted to leave, and now there are these new biometric checks. And I think there was one particular EasyJet flight where hundreds of people, or certainly about 100 people, missed their flight, even though they'd got there in good time, 3 hours, 4 hours early. But it was taking so long to go through some of the European airports because this teething new system. People are missing their flights. But this is what happens. I mean, I remember it wasn't that long ago you could just walk through from one country to the next, but lots of people didn't like that, and they voted for something else, and now they're front of the queue and moaning that it's strangely they've got tough new passport control.
And saying that we're being punished because we left the EU. No, this is just what happens when you're not part of a bloc.
Exactly. There's 27 countries in the Schengen area. If they've got rules and we're not part of them. I think it's time to find yourself an EU relative if you haven't already got one, and get a passport that gets you through these things. I mean, we're not even into the peak holiday season yet. So when it gets to the summer season and the school holidays, I think this is a result of what happened over the Easter break and the recent school holidays that's still on. But it'll only get worse in the summer unless either they put more customs officers on to speed it up, or
yeah, well, that was the rule that changed, wasn't it? This is why it's suddenly a problem, because up until now, where there was a lot of people queuing, the airports could revert to human beings and check passports, but now they're being told that they can't, that people have got to go through this system because of the biometrics and everything.
I think the only place you don't have to at the moment is channel crossings. I think that's not quite introduced there, but everywhere else it is. So if the queue's too long, as you say, they used to be able to just waive that and say, actually, we're not doing that for now, but now the rules are in and you've just got to join the queue.
You've just got to join the queue and hope for the best.
Exactly, means people are going to have to get to airports potentially 5, 6, 7 hours early just to make sure they get through.
You know, it might not be a problem in the summer, considering we might not have the jet fuel.
Well, exactly.
So,
Look on the
look on the bright side.
Yes, exactly.
The planes will be cancelled.
And if they're not, we won't be able to afford the fares anyway.
We won't be able to afford it anyway. So it's, you know, there's always a silver lining of sorts. What else have the Eye got on the front page? Are you a golfing man?
I did stay up and watch McIlroy win. Yes,
did you?
Yes, it's quite moving seeing his wife, mother, and father, and his young daughter there at the end. And it was a lot less tense than it was last time. He did, in the end, win reasonably comfortably. He did. So he's only the 4th person, I think, to win twice in a row, so it's pretty remarkable. And
his parents, I understand, didn't want to be there because they thought it would jinx him, because he won last year without them there, and they were saying, no, if we come, you'll lose. So he had to persuade them to actually be in the audience.
Yeah, and it's great that they were there, so the whole family were there. And he's now won twice in a row, which is pretty rare. I think the last time that happened was Tiger Woods in about 20 years ago, so it's a very rare thing. But it's amazing how many times I'm a very bad golfer, but I was safe to say he missed some of the fairways by so much that I could have missed the fairways by that much.
Really?
I mean, he kept ending up in the trees and still won, so it's pretty remarkable.
You never know. You never know, Vincent. That could be your future, your future career. Let's take a quick break. Vincent, I'll be back in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a good evening to you. This is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you, and with me, Vincent Moss, former political editor. The Financial Times, Vincent, ex-NATO chief Robertson hits out at Starmer complacency, talking about the lack of defence cash puts UK in peril. Decisions have got to be made, haven't they? Now, I mean, we've been exposed, it seems, as being much weaker than people thought we were. Yeah, very much so. There were quite a lot of sort of humiliating episodes in the sort of run-up to what was happening in the Gulf, with various sort of warships unable to leave port, and then even just not looking as though we're battle-ready, as it were. And the former Labour Defence Secretary, Lord George Robertson, former NATO chief, been very critical of the Labour government, saying corrosive complacency towards defence, putting the country in peril while it's under attack. And he refers to the Chancellor just committing a mere 40 words, as he puts it, on defence in a speech that she made over an hour long in her budget speech. And in the spring statement, she didn't mention defence at all. Well, of course, it's a very difficult one for the government, because it knows it needs to spend more on defence, and it has committed to spending more on defence, but there really just isn't any money in the current coffers to do it. So it is yet another... Well, it's a choice, isn't it? It's a political choice. Yeah. It's welfare over warfare. There's no point having a welfare system that is going to collapse under its own weight at some point anyway, if we can't defend ourselves. Yes. Nothing else really matters if we can't defend ourselves. Absolutely, and Labour keep pointing towards its strategic defence review and saying that it's committed to up spending as demanded by Trump, but it's all sort of very I mean, they're talking about raising it from 3% eventually to 5% of GDP, but that's by 2035, quite a long way off, and people really want to see action now. But as you say, while the welfare bill is spiralling, it's very hard to find money for causes like defence. Yeah, it really, really is. This is interesting. Rachel Reeves is heading off to Washington. These people are never here, are they? Reeves lures Gulf expats with a pledge to revisit tax shift that repelled global rich. And interestingly, she's promising to revisit, via consultation, tax rules that mean people who receive income from US limited liability companies face being taxed on both sides of the Atlantic. Any change that might make the UK more attractive to American citizens who have left the Gulf but are reluctant to return to the US. So she's coming up with a third way. Yeah, it's a bit of a pitch to those sort of people who went to Dubai to try and avoid UK tax, trying to sort of ease some of the tax burden on the wealthier, not least because there's been a lot of criticism that a lot of wealthy millionaires have been leaving the UK since Labour came to power. Something the government disputes, says the figures aren't as high as some people have claimed, but they are fairly high. Lots of rich people seem to be settling in places like Milan and Switzerland, and the Chancellor says that she'll be using the US trip to set her approach to navigating the global crisis and bang the drum for UK PLC. But of course, what a lot of the top economists are saying is that UK is likely to be hit harder than quite a lot of the other G7 nations by the economic sort of crisis that's coming because of what's happening in the Gulf. So she's going to talk a good game, and she says she's going with a clear message about how we must all take coordinated economic action. But really what people at home want to see is taking action to ensure that we're not as badly hit by this crisis as we look as ever going to be. And I'm sorry, but she is not one of those speakers that makes people feel better for having listened to her, right? She's just appalling. Well, I think one of the criticisms was in her first fiscal statements, she was too gloomy and too lacking in optimism, and that in itself had a negative effect on market confidence and business confidence and was counterproductive. Yeah, I just can't imagine anybody going, yay, Rachel Reeves is speaking. But do they say that about any Chancellor, though? I can't think of... Not. And if they are, you'd probably be quite worried, because if they're giving money away... Yeah, that's true. That is true. Maybe that was a little unfair, but I find her so... I find her unlistenable, actually. It's not just because she's just unlistenable. I can't do it. I have to listen to her enough that I choose not to when I don't have to. The Metro, Trump versus the Pope. I never thought I'd see that, but there you go. And again, killer's parents blamed for not stopping the attack. So there really is an appetite go after like you said, the police are not going to do this, but there is an appetite now to go for the parents in this case, and I think others. If you allow your child to go out with a machete or a knife of some sort, then
yeah, very much so. Metro says over a long period of time he'd been an aggressive, near total recluse who bullied and threatened his family. So it wasn't as though, I mean, they were also victims because they were at the sort of getting threatened and abused by him as well, but they still stood by him and still protected him, even
and downplayed his behaviour, which led to him not being arrested, which led to these little girls being slaughtered. Just extraordinary. And the Independent as well, going with the Southport killers' parents and police are to blame for the rampage. So I suppose the agencies that got involved not holding as much blame because the parents would have misinformed them.
Yes.
So
well, exactly. I mean, they were being lied to effectively, weren't they? So you can argue they could have dug deeper. They should have tried to find out more, but they're already busy doing hundreds of other cases.
And if they're told, no, that he's fine, don't worry about it, then they're going to move on.
Yeah.
And that's where the parents here are culpable.
Yes.
I think. And also the Independent picking up on the Pope and Trump, which is not a battle that I ever thought would happen between the President of the United States and the head of the Christian Church, but there you go. And right at the top of there, pink pilling, trad wives, and anti-feminism. It's time to talk about the womanosphere, like the manosphere.
Yes, I don't know what the womanosphere is really.
The womanosphere is just doing damage to women, whereas the manosphere is doing damage to women. So, I mean, you know what I mean?
It's an omnisphere then, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. They're the same thing. Trad wives and anti-feminism. I mean, that's what the manosphere is all about.
Yeah.
So it's not that it's anti-men, whereas the manosphere is anti-women.
Yes.
So I don't see the point of talking about the womanosphere, because all they're doing is playing into the hands of the manosphere. Ridiculous, pointless, silly women, silly cows. Right, that's the papers. We've got a few minutes left. What have you found?
Well, interesting story in the Mail. I mean, just showing how hard it is to be a driver these days. There's this terrible story of this psychiatrist, Dr. Gary Duffield. He was 67 years old and he's facing a driving ban for driving at 22 miles an hour because he's already got 9 points on his licence, even though he hasn't gone faster, if you can call it going faster, than 25 miles an hour. So he's been stopped doing 22 miles an hour in a 20 zone last year, had to do a speed awareness course, and after 3 further penalties for travelling at 22 miles an hour. I mean, there must be joggers and cyclists that go faster than that.
This is crazy. This is just penalising somebody.
And he now stands, 67-year-old man, stands to lose his licence for 6 months if he's caught again. This is in Hackney and Camden. More than half the capital's roads now have a 20-mile-an-hour limit, and this guy's pootling along, and it is really pootling along at 22 miles an hour.
I mean, you could easily accidentally do that. That is not deliberate speeding, right?
Very much so. He says he saw line bikes whizzing past him and breaching the speed limit, so they don't get done, and there he is picking up points. And pretty much, and he's a consultant forensic psychiatrist, I would argue, somebody who probably needs his car and is a useful addition to society, and he now faces potentially, if he gets stopped one more time, a driving ban because he's on 9 points already and he's not gone faster than 22 miles an hour to get his bans. I mean, if that isn't appalling.
Ridiculous. I was talking about this, I think it was last week, we did a phone-in on it, and just how many people are now getting speeding tickets for doing exactly that, for doing 22 miles.
And there's some pretty straight roads even in places like London, and not only that, but a lot of people have experienced this. You're behind a car in front of you who's got a speed limiter on, so they don't get done for this sort of thing, usually an Uber or a taxi or something, and they've got cars behind them beeping them because a lot of other people find 20 miles an hour, 19 miles an hour quite slow. And you'd expect maybe to get a ticket if you were doing 30 in a 20.
Yeah.
But 22
because that's deliberate. 22 is not deliberate, right?
No, exactly. And it's not that fast.
And there must be a margin of error.
I think the margin of error is about 2 miles an hour or 10%. So if you get done at 22, 23, that's when you're into the danger zone. Who'd have thought you'd be in danger of a ticket at 22? So a pretty appalling but unfortunately quite common story of what's happening to motorists doing 22 miles an hour now, just 2 miles over the speed limit, and get caught 2 or 3 times and you're facing a ban.
I just think that is absolutely obscene. I really do. And it's clearly not deliberate. I mean, his speedo might even tell him he's doing 20.
Well, exactly. And those of us with very old cars, you've not even got a speedo, you've just got one of those dials, so it's very hard to read those. And it's not just the trying to lower the limits, and safety campaigners will argue it's to make the roads safer. It's a huge revenue-raising thing in terms of issuing fines for local authorities.
Well, and also these speed awareness courses rake in millions across the country. So, I mean, they're all making a lot of money out of it as well.
It's a racket, isn't it?
It is a racket. I think we've got time for one more.
Yeah, rise of the unretirees, says the Mail. One pensioner in 6 is now heading back to the workplace. So this is about people who've retired. 16% of retirees who were surveyed are returning to employment or say they're considering going back. You know, so instead of travelling the world or putting their feet up, they're going back, and a lot of that is because the financial realities hitting, according to Standard Life, because they've sort of thought they'd have enough to retire. Turns out with the cost of living they haven't. Some people may want to go back to work because they get a bit bored, but a lot of it is running out of cash. So 1 in 6 people over retirement age are considering going back to work. So if it wasn't hard enough for a young person trying to get a job, you're now competing against these retirees trying to get back in the workplace.
If you go to B&Q, you see a lot of these older gentlemen and ladies, which I love, actually.
And also they know their stuff, don't they? And Waitrose.
Yeah, and Waitrose. Vincent Moss, thank you. You're not allowed to retire ever, so thank you very much indeed for being here. Vincent Moss, former political editor. And don't go anywhere, because coming up it is Talkback, and I want you to do exactly that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and a very good morning to you. It is Petrie here with you for the next hour, and this is your chance to literally talk back. It is the Talkback hour. And it was interesting because when we were discussing what to do as the phone-in for this morning, we couldn't have known what the front pages of the papers said. We didn't know. We had no idea that there were papers, a lot of papers this morning, calling for the parents to be held responsible for what happened when Axel Rudakabana went into that dance class, that Taylor Swift dance class, and murdered 3 little girls and injured many more and traumatised everybody else. But certainly the Daily Express and the bereaved families of the Southport victims want Axel Rudakabana's parents to be held to account for their failure to stop the killer. So I'm actually quite blown away that was the line that we came up with for the phone-in, was should the parents be held criminally responsible for their children's behaviour? And certainly when you look at the situation with Axel Rudakabana, his parents did know that they knew their son had large knives, the pulp of poison ricin, and an obsession with violence. So the judge recommended a law change so that parents, guardians or bystanders have a duty to report criminal activity. Rudakabana was 17, killed B.B. King, who was 6, Elsie Dot Stankham, 7, and 9-year-old Alice De Silva Aguirre at a dance class on July 29th, 2024. He attempted to murder 10 others. Solicitor Chris Walker for the family said of Rudakabana and his parents, he had not left the house for 2 years except when armed and seeking to cause harm, yet they didn't report. They did nothing. So it is interesting to me that the papers, so that's the Express, also killer's parents blamed for not stopping the attack, that's the Metro, and Southport killers to blame for not stopping the attack, that's the Telegraph. So many people calling on the parents to accept the responsibility for this. And the father did say that he was sorry. That doesn't really help, does it? He said that he had, the love I had for him overrode my good judgment. And the Sir Adrian said that the killer's parents had failed to act out of misguided and an irresponsible desire to avoid him being taken into care. So this is Sir Adrian Fulford who put together this report. But when you find out that Axel Rudakabana's father, Alphonse Rudakabana, had deliberately withheld information about his son amassing a stash of deadly weapons, including the biological toxin ricin, which we know is deadly, right? So the parents knew about this, but not only failed to report, but also downplayed, when approached by agencies, downplayed his behaviour, lied to keep him out of trouble. And while that is, I guess, understandable for a parent to do, it nonetheless put the lives of other people's children in jeopardy. So just where does the balance of responsibility lie? I mean, look, Axel Rudakabana carried out his evil intentions, but he would not have been able to had the police arrested him and charged him when he was carrying a knife on a bus, and his parents had told the agencies that were trying to get involved in the family just how violent he was and just how much he was making their life hell with violence as well. But they didn't. They protected him and they lied for him. And the thing is that if that had been friends of Axel Rudakabana or anybody else who had protected him, they would be held criminally responsible. So why isn't it that the parents are being... The police said they're not going to issue charges against the parents, but the families, the bereaved families of those victims, want the parents to be held to account. So the question I have for you is, do you think that they should be held to account? And furthermore, we've seen it happen in America where parents have been held criminally responsible and jailed for their part in their children carrying out mass shootings or mass killings. They have been held criminally responsible. Where do you draw the line between being a protective parent and a parent like these parents who allowed their son to go on and murder 3 little girls, attempt to murder 10 others? I mean, it really doesn't get much worse than that. And saying sorry, I'm sorry, that doesn't feel like it's enough. And I honestly think that if we had just a few test cases of this, where parents were held responsible for their kids going out and stabbing each other, then parents might start taking more responsibility, right? This is a deterrent. This would be a deterrent for parents, that maybe they would then report their children for fear of themselves going to jail. Or maybe you think that the parent shouldn't be held responsible for a 17-year-old. He's practically an adult. That they shouldn't be held responsible. But you are responsible. That's the whole point of being a parent, right? You are responsible for them until they become adults. That's your job. So if you're not really being responsible for them, carrying out your side of the bargain, then should you be held criminally responsible for their actions? Give me a call. I mean, I'm interested in this because I think that they should be, but then I've only got one child. So if you've got 3 children and 2 of them are angels and the other one's a monster, then to what degree are the parents responsible? So I do see that there is some wiggle room in this, and some vagaries in this. So give me a call. Maybe you have got 3 kids or 2 kids and one's great and one's not so great, and you don't think you should be held responsible with the one that is, you know, off the scales, violent or behaves in a completely different way. 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at the national rate, but we do call you back. And text the word talk and your message to 87222. Well, I have a clip here of the chairman of the Southport inquiry, Sir Adrian Fulford, who spoke in Liverpool today about how the tragedy could and should have been avoided.
First, the attack on the 29th of July would not have occurred if AR's parents had reported to the authorities the full extent of what they knew in late July, including on the day of the attack. Second, if the relevant agencies, individually and collectively, had properly managed and responded to the known danger that he posed to others from December 2019 onwards, it is highly likely that this event would not have occurred.
Can you imagine being the parents listening to that and knowing that this could and should have been prevented? I mean, there's one thing, isn't it, if you can say it couldn't have been prevented, you know, this person, it wasn't, nobody suspected him, nobody knew, nobody had an inkling that he had these violent tendencies. That's one thing, right? And you can almost go, well, that it's horrendous, but it couldn't have been foreseen. But when you have a situation that it was predictable that this would happen, and that the parents lying to authorities or not telling the truth to authorities, whichever way you want to put it, and authorities not respond, I mean, and knowing that this could and should have been prevented, it's got to be the hardest thing to ever hear. Shabana Mahmood, of course, our Secretary of State for Justice, also reacted to the Southport inquiry, highlighting the many mistakes that happened along the way.
Findings of the inquiry are unsparing. Sir Adrian has uncovered systematic failures across multiple public sector organisations. The failure, because it belonged to everyone, belonged to no one. Where individuals missed opportunities to intervene, lessons must be learnt. The perpetrator came into contact with the state on countless occasions. Lancashire Police responded to 5 calls to his home address. The police were called when he was in possession of a knife in a public place. He was referred on several occasions to the multi-agency safeguarding hub. He came into contact with Children's Social Care, the Early Help Service, and Children's Mental Health Services. He was referred to Prevent on 3 occasions. He was convicted of a violent assault and referred to a youth offending team. All failed to identify the risk that the perpetrator posed. The horrific attack was itself evidence of the ease with which it could be concluded.
I hate that phrase. Lessons need to be learned. Are they ever? But there are calls, as I said, to hold the parents somewhat responsible for this attack carried out by their son. And while you may have sympathy with the parents, it's really hard not to see that they themselves could have just been honest about their son and got him the help that he needed, and also got him away from what he eventually did, carried out those horrendous murders of those 3 little girls at a dance class during their summer holidays. It just is, it is just terrible that those parents didn't report. So the judge there also suggesting that it's going to be made a law change so that parents, guardians or bystanders have a duty to report criminal activity. So it will be a law that says if you don't report it, then you're breaking the law. Maybe that has to come before we hold parents criminally responsible, but it's hard to argue that in this case they could have stopped this. They could have stopped this had they just reported him. Let's go to Tanya, who's in Devon. Morning, Tanya, how are you?
Hi there. No, I don't. I can see slippery slope coming here, and I with this particular case, I mean, it depends whether you're talking about just this particular incident of not reporting ricin, because I thought that was a criminal offence in itself, so surely they would be held accountable for having that, wouldn't they, anywhere in the house?
You would think so, but maybe they didn't know it was ricin. I don't know, but it says that they did know. I mean, that... how can you... but also lots of knives. You knew your kid had knives.
Yeah, well, so do lots of other parents. But what I would say is that on this, no, I don't agree with... Clearly, they want a parent blame, but first of all, before we start blaming parents, can I see Tony Blair arrested for crimes against humanity? Can I see the people who did Grenfell Tower cladding arrested and held accountable? Can I see a lot of corporations held accountable? Can I see, for instance, and also the police, the parents, can I just say on this particular case, he'd already been caught with a knife and the police did nothing. Why did they do nothing? I mean, the parents probably thought, what's the point in calling the police? They're not going to do anything anyway.
But they didn't just not report. That when they were asked about his behaviour, they played it down. And they tried to protect him from potentially going into care. So they didn't tell the truth about his out-of-control behaviour at home. So that is obstruction, if at the very least.
Well, it's only obstruction after the event, because we're talking with hindsight, okay? And I think that hindsight's a wonderful thing. Had they any idea what their son was going to do?
But he'd already tried to take a knife into school. and was and meant to hurt kids at school.
Yeah, and the police knew about that, didn't they, and decided to do nothing?
No, I think they did do something on that occasion. But
that was known about. They didn't conceal that. But I mean, we're talking about this particular set of parents. But what I would say is that which parents are we going to blame if we start blaming parents after events? Because shall we start on single mothers first? Shall we pick the demographic who is at the bottom of society and has no support and is struggling with like 3 jobs and maybe 10 kids? Shall we have the step-parents held accountable when they've come at a late stage? Shall we have adopted parents held accountable? Shall we hold the parents accountable that have left and gone away, like fathers, dumped their kids and gone off? Because it'd be nice if they were held accountable one day. Probably never will be. But will it be the mother who's left behind who's held accountable? I mean, I could go on and on and on.
No, I do take your point, Tanya. As usual, you make some very good points, and I do accept that it possibly would be single parents who are struggling and trying to do their best and not being able to keep an eye on the kids and what they're doing. But you have a situation where in America they're already doing this. They're already holding parents criminally responsible. These parents are going to jail.
Do we have to do everything that America does? I mean, because actually the reason I rang was because when you sort of asked this question, it reminded me of something else that happened in America recently. And that has happened, and that is somebody who committed suicide. The partner of that person has in court been held responsible as in killing, I'm not sure if it was murder or killing, but for the death of that person as in they killed them or they murdered them.
I think that was in Scotland. Actually,
was it in Scotland?
There was a case where an abuser, the abused wife ran in front of a car and killed herself, and he's been held. Yeah,
he has been. One I was thinking of. There was one that may be another one I'm vague, but the one I was thinking of was in America. The woman jumped off a bridge. But
it is against the law to push somebody to suicide or to convince somebody to kill themselves. That is against the law.
But he didn't do that. The point is that this person killed themselves after apparently they did have years of abuse from their partner. But I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not against. Obviously, he should have been done for domestic abuse or whatever else he did to the woman, absolutely, and probably before she killed herself. But of course, nothing would have been done until it was too late.
Yeah.
But the point is that the woman had problems anyway, regardless. Okay, and if you start, I mean, my partner committed suicide. Okay, if you start to say that partners, families or friends of people who commit suicide are responsible for their suicide because they said something wrong, where do we draw the line? I mean, I just don't think if someone kills themselves, there are many, many reasons why they do that. My brother did as well, my brother and my partner. And you cannot always be sure exactly what their reasoning was, and it's very dangerous to start calling suicide murder. And no matter how, you have to be careful here. And this is why I started thinking about the slippery slope thing with this blaming the parents. Because, if we're talking, what about really well-off parents who've got all the support for their kids and everything? And what about them, and we know that the people like the McCanns won't get blamed, because they're doctors, so they'll be allowed to abandon their kids, do whatever they want. And, it'll be, we know which parents will get held accountable, right? And it won't be the ones that, it won't be a certain demographic that gets blamed for what their kids do. It'll be, And
but is it just possible that the certain demographics kids are not the ones that are out with knives?
Well, then
because of the parenting.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that. Exactly. Well, why is that the case? Why is it kids on rough estates and council estates feel more scared and go out carrying knives?
Yeah,
that's another thing you need to look at. But I think, don't get me wrong, I think there are ways of, of course we can, it'd be good if kids didn't feel the need to carry knives. But the fact is that they're going to conceal it from their parents, and it may not always be, a parent may not always know what's going on, and parents who may be working 3 jobs may not have the time to know what's going on as opposed to someone else. And when do we start blaming, say, grandparents who are looking after the kids? When do we start blaming teachers who tell a kid it's okay to be another sex which the parents might not be happy with? When do we start blaming elder brothers and sisters, uncles, aunts, who may have a lot of input in the kids? I mean, you could just go on and on. Babysitters, I mean, I just think, clearly the state want to blame the parents, right? But the state also are constantly interfering in how parents deal with their children, and what you should do and what you shouldn't do.
Yeah, and disciplining them at an earlier age, perhaps, and things like that. Yeah.
So, I mean, if parents are given full freedom, but they're not, they're constantly told this, that, and the kid goes to school, it says the wrong thing about a religion, and before you know it, it's like there's too much control already. And I get what you're saying, and I think that, but I think to actually say that they're responsible when for something with hindsight is very easy. No one knows when a kid's going to do something absolutely off the wall like he did. It's beyond anyone's imagination.
Do you know what? But when I was asking the question, before I asked the question, what I was thinking about was the Bulger case, which kind of rocked my world. I think it's one of those cases that sticks with you, right? Yeah. And would I have held the parents of those two boys responsible? And I can't think of a good reason why I would have done, because those boys just decided that was what they were going to do. I don't think the parents had any inkling of their intention to do that. So I think you make some really good points, which has made me stop in my tracks a bit.
Well, actually, as well, when you think about it as well, what you've just mentioned about the Bulger case is, of course, we're talking about these kind of things with parents knowing about knives, but what about all the real subtle psychological stuff that goes on that's hidden in families that we can't necessarily pick apart?
Yeah.
And it's very, once the state starts coming in, and it just becomes very difficult to pick apart who's responsible for what in what family.
And we do hold children criminally responsible from the age of 10. But I just think it's interesting when you see, this particular case where this guy, Sir Adrian, has highlighted just how the parents not doing what they should have done is a causal factor in Rudy Cabana going on and doing what he did.
Yeah, but they also highlighted a lot of other people who didn't do what they should have done. And you usually find in all these kind of things that there's lots of different areas where it's like the butterfly effect. Do you know what I mean? We can go on and on forever with it. We can, and in the end, and I've gone through this in my own life as well. It's like, when you go back and you think, they fuck you up, their mum and dad, they do not mean to do the blah, 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 blah. And if you go back to that and where do you go back with the blame? Because they were a product of their parents, they were a product of, and eventually I found in the end you can only go back to God or the gods if you believe in that, or the universe. Because ultimately we don't see the future, and we're all fallible. We're all fallible.
But is it different to actually lie to authorities and say that your son is fine?
Well, my answer to that would be, I'll stop lying to authorities when the authorities stop lying to us, okay?
Yeah. I mean, I really can't argue with you, Tanya. I think that was a very strong call, actually. Right. So thank you for that. Right. And it does make you think. I mean, as much as I would love it to just be black and white, it isn't, and it never will be. And as Tanya said, where do you stop? Who do you blame? How do you decide who's to blame? But I think in this case, this particular case, there was a lack of moral judgment that came to play, and the parents are now asking for the parents of the deceased are now asking for the parents of Axel Rudy Cabana to face some sort of challenge on their behaviour. Anyway, I've got to take a break. Back in a sec.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a good morning to you. This is Talk, and it's Petrie with you. And front pages for today are littered with statements about the Southport killers and about the Southport killers' parents. Axel Rudikabana's mum and dad are, in this report, have been blamed, along with the police, for the rampage. And they're saying that had they been honest about their son and his tendency for violence, that this would not have happened. And so the parents, it would appear, are seeking for Axel Rudikabana's parents to answer for this, for their failings, although the Lancashire police have said that they're not planning on charging the parents. I don't know what they would charge them with. But the inquiry chairman, Sir Adrian Fulford, said that the murderous attack would not have happened had the mum and dad done what they morally ought to have done. And there's calling for a law change so that parents, guardians or bystanders have a duty to report criminal activity. So it would actually become illegal not to, and I guess that would be the precursor for then being able to charge the parents with a crime of not reporting. Alphonse Rudikabana and Letitia Muzayi knew their son had large knives, the pulp of poison ricin, and an obsession with violence. How do you let your kid have ricin? How is that a thing? I mean, and all the knives as well, and the violence that he acted out at home too. Southport killers' parents and police to blame. Now hold the parents to account for their moral failure to act. Killers' parents blamed for not stopping the attack. Southport killers' parents to blame for not stopping the attack. That's just 4 of the newspaper front pages for today. Sorry. So I'm asking you, should the parents be held responsible for what happened here? And indeed, should parents be held responsible for their children acting out violence anyway? It's happening in America. Gary is in Manchester. Good morning, Gary.
Hello, Petrie. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm not too bad.
Good.
Now, let me, don't get me misunderstood here or anything.
Right.
About his parents, right? It's about him. He should have a corporal punishment for once. He should have been strung up like a lot of them. Well, I remember listening to his show about parents who was bullied. It wasn't that long ago, and it was shocking to me that they was getting bullied off the children.
Yeah, it's a new... that's just becoming public now, that parental abuse, yeah.
And the police didn't want to know anything about it. So where do you go from there? If you're a parent and your son's got you petrified, you can't go to the police because, you know, the parents was that petrified. If they did go to the police, then they wouldn't have listened to them. They just say, well, your children, discipline them.
Yeah, control them. I think that is changing because it's this phenomenon now that people are talking about is parental abuse by the children abusing parents. I think that is becoming much more widely known as a form of abuse. But to not tell the truth when you're asked about it. And he said, look, his love for the boy stopped him from doing the right thing because he didn't want him taken away. You'd think that if your child was abusing you and being violent to you, that's exactly what you'd want. You'd want them taken away.
Oh, yes, without a doubt. But can you believe what this judgment has said? fully believe it.
Well, yeah, because the dad did apologise. He said he was sorry that he didn't report him.
Of course he would apologise for his son's actions. You know, but if hindsight was a rule, then it wouldn't have happened. But it's not.
But they knew that he had knives and violent tendencies, and he'd tried to... The father had already stopped him going into the school with a knife in his bag. He'd already been chucked out of one school for carrying a knife. You know, the police were culpable as well, but it's interesting that the agencies, the children care agencies and all of those things, haven't been held as responsible as they normally would be because of the parents, because the parents downplayed his violent tendencies at home. They downplayed his sickness, if you like, and so the parents were involved in. Do you know what I mean? They made it.
I understand what you're saying, but to be honest, I can't believe that the parents would have condoned this. Not a chance.
No, but what did the dad say? Let me see if I can find the dad said, "The love I had for him overrode my good judgment." So he knew, but he just decided that he wasn't going to say anything.
I'm sure he couldn't have known about what he was going to do in Southport.
Well, he couldn't have. No. I mean, no. If he, I presume if he'd known that his son was going to get a cab and go and stab 3 little girls to death and try to kill 10 others, he would have stopped it. But
the taxi driver, he said he could have stopped it.
But he allowed his son to have knives and ricin, and who bought that stuff? You know, who paid for it?
Yeah.
There is culpability here.
Yeah, well, they should be held to be accountable, shouldn't they?
I think so.
You sort of changed my mind a little bit, but all I was pointing out was how parents that had been bullied by the children had gone to the police, and the police said, "Get away, you sort it out yourself."
Yeah, no, I get that. I completely respect that as a point, and it's a point well made, Gary. So thank you for making it. It is a good point, that if you report your kid saying that they're out of control, what are the police going to do? Are they just going to go, well, it's your kid, sort it out? I don't know. Gary's probably right. They probably would. Got to take a break. I'll be back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, and a good morning to you. This is Talk, and it is Petrie. A couple of messages I want to read out. Angie said, who gave him the money or the cards to buy the knives, etc.? There is a responsibility there. surely the parents could have stopped this when he first showed an interest in weapons way before he murdered those girls. I'm more interested, Angie, in the ricin. If they knew he had ricin. I mean, there's no excuse for ricin, right? What do you say? I don't know. But yeah, very good point. That, you know, he had knives delivered to the house. So they must have known. Well, they did know. They did know, but they didn't report it. Gary said it's a tough one. In general, I don't think others should be held responsible for their children's crimes. However, regarding the father's statement, they obviously knew he had serious issues and therefore they should have alerted authorities to prevent and protect both their son and potential victims, if that makes sense. Yes, it does, absolutely. So that's Gary in Glasgow saying that it is a tough one, but if you know your kid's that far gone, what do you do? Alison is in County Antrim. Good morning.
Hello.
Hello there.
Hi, Petrie.
What do you make of this, Alison?
Yeah, well, normally I would kind of say it's a bit of a tough one because of his age, but the gravity of what he's done, you know, 3 little girls and like that's now 3 broken families.
Yeah.
That are left grieving, you know, and those little girls will never come back. And you know.
But for the judge, for the guy, the Sir Adrian here, saying, if the parents had just done what they should have done, this would have been stopped. It's really tough to, you know, it must be tough for them to hear that, the parents, but also tough for the parents of the little girls who were killed and maimed on that day.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to countenance the fact that, you know, the father's statement and stuff that he gave to the police clearly indicates that they had knowledge of what was going on with their son. But, you know, the knives would have been a massive red flag to me straight away.
Yeah, me too. And the ricin. I mean,
what exactly is that?
It's a poison. It's a poison that is grown, I think, from... I think it is even. I can't remember. I did know because there was that ricin attack in Japan, where loads of people were killed on the railways. It's very dangerous. It's a very, very dangerous poison that can kill many people. And I can't believe that they knew he had ricin and just went, "Oh, that's all right then,"
and just kind of were a bit blasé about it. Maybe kind of brushed it off. And I mean, part of me does feel for them because, I mean, lives will be forever changed by what he's done as well, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the 10 little girls that survived but were injured, and the teacher, and all those, the trauma of that for the rest of their lives. I mean, the knock-on effect is huge. And I just think when it comes to the parents actually downplaying his condition to authorities that came in contact with them, that does make them more culpable, in my view.
Yeah, I do too. I would agree with that 100%, actually.
Yeah, if you're kind of lying to the authorities, no, he's fine, he's, you know. But apparently he was violent at home and was making threats against them and all of these things. Yeah.
I mean, the caller before Gary, I think it was, the lady who was speaking, she said, you know, about the fact that, you know, that, like, I don't know,
Well, Tonya, when she was talking about, you know, where do you stop and who we know the kind of parent that will get the blame. I don't know. I think when it's, you know, in America...
It's a hard one.
It is a hard one because I can imagine there are families out there where they've got, you know, 2 perfectly angelic children and 1 demon, right? And they go, well, it's obviously not us. It's not our upbringing. It's the character of the child. So therefore, but then if you think that they're at risk, do you think it should be made a law as a parent that if you think your children are at risk of becoming violent, that you report it?
I think it might make people sit up and take notice, you know, parents.
Yeah.
And they might kind of, you know, be a bit more aware of what could be going on, because, you know, you think your darling little son or daughter is fine and they're okay, but, you know, they could present a different face to somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, and especially at that age, because they're so impressionable.
Yeah, I mean,
know,
again, with the sort of serial killers, or not serial killers, the rage killers in America, these kids that go and do a school shooting or whatever, it always is that people kind of knew, right? They go, oh, he was a bit weird, he was a bit into violent cartoons, or never stopped talking about violence, and, you know, was always talking about shooting up the school, or and you just think, well, why didn't you report that? It just as you know, there's a lot of people that when these things happen, you think, well, you knew that this was likely.
Yeah, that there were signs there.
Yeah. I mean, with this Rudiger Barner, there was so many signs. And it's not just the parents, right? I think Gary made a good point in saying, look, if you report your kid for being violent, what are the police going to do? If they haven't actually done anything yet, what are the police actually going to do? And he's right, probably nothing, right? But I think lying to the authorities is where I draw the line.
Yeah, I mean, that lady, sorry, I've just remembered, I'm just quite tired, I couldn't quite remember there when you asked me. Yeah, she was saying about, you know, it's hard to pick apart the different sort of dynamics that evolve in families, and that is quite true, you know.
That is true.
You know, they can vary from case to case. I mean, that's why there's so many, you know, social worker difficulties and things go on, you know, in some of these cruelty cases that you hear of, and, you know, cues that they maybe don't pick up on.
Yeah,
know,
I think that it is a good point. I think it is complicated.
Oh, definitely.
By the sort of family dynamics but if you know something is off,
it ought to be said, because
you're not only are you protecting other people's children, but you're actually protecting your own child as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because like his life is ruined now.
Yeah, and he could have, you know, he could have been diverted from this, and those three little girls would be like, I mean, it is one thing. It's unusual to see a report like this, Alison, and have the parents so squarely blamed. That's what's unusual about this. It is the report found that this was the case. You know, that it's not just us saying it. It you know, it is unusual. If you think back, you don't often get that. If you think about other cases, you very rarely see that this. If the parents had done the right thing, this wouldn't have happened. It's so blatant and but I am with you as well, Alison. I do think it's complicated. I do. I get it. I get that it's complicated, but I do think in this case that the parents do have something to answer for. They really do. Just before I go to a break, Joanna says, I just don't know how parents don't report them for things like Rudiger Barner was doing. If you love your child, you would report him. He could have been killed by armed police. Surely a parent wouldn't want that. Joanna from Salisbury. Yeah, it is. I know what it's like, though, to not want to report your kid, but if they had, these little girls may well have been, according to this guy, they would have been alive today. Quick break. When I come back, I'm going to talk to Sheldon.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a very good morning to you. This is Petrie here with you until the top of the hour, and we've been talking about the Southport report that has come out, a 760-page report, where the parents have, I think, rather unusually been held up as one of the major factors in this case that allowed Axel Rudikwabana to go on and murder those 3 little girls in Southport at that dance class, also attempt to murder and seriously injure 8 other girls and 2 adults that were severely injured in the case. And the parents, it seems, are being held up as being somewhat culpable for this teenager being able to get out there and do these evil deeds. Indeed, many papers are now saying now hold them accountable, the parents, for their moral failure to act. The police in Lancashire are saying they're not prepared. They're not prepared to go. They're not preparing to go and arrest the parents. It would be hard to imagine what they'd be arrested for, but there is a call for a change in the law to make it a criminal offence not to report violent behaviour from a child if you know them to be violent. And they did know him to be violent, and they knew he had knives, and rather bizarrely they knew he had ricin, which is extraordinary. I can't quite get my head around that. Sheldon is on the line now. Good morning, Sheldon. How are you?
I'm okay, darling. How are you, Petrie?
Good. I'm very well indeed for a Tuesday morning. Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, we got a very serious topic tonight, obviously. And first of all, may I say that my serious sympathies, first of all, go out to these beautiful little children who have lost their lives.
I know. Awful.
I cannot believe how I would feel as a parent.
No.
So as a parent, I'll speak from that perspective first. However, I do think there is a moral issue here regarding parenthood, which is a confliction. First of all, you have the moral ability to bring your children up correctly. And secondly, if you have a difficult child, you obviously have the moral duty to try and rectify it. Now, this young man who performed these horrific acts were known to several authorities and agencies for quite some time. And during this, I watched the gentleman on the television who summed up the whole case, and he eventually took them off the hook and put the parents on the hook. Now, you can go on and on in the past, and you can think, Petrie, back. It can be whether it's a child or whether it's the parents who have abused children, or in this case, a young man who's gone out and killed children. And all these agencies always have to learn a lesson. But what lessons do they ever learn?
Yeah, that drives me nuts, Sheldon. It really does.
Now, the problem is, if you're a parent who doesn't trust authority and has no experience of authority helping you in any way, why would you report anything to any one of these authorities, including the police?
Yeah.
I find it very difficult, because if it was my child, and I know this gentleman this guy is completely out of order. I'm not excusing his actions at all. But as far as the nuclear family are concerned in this case, how the hell are they supposed to stop an event which is out of their control? It was in their control. It was in their control to an extent, because they knew what he was up to in the case of weaponry, and we can go through the racing thing, but I don't want to go down that road. But I want to go through the road of the escalation that came to what he became.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Sheldon, but they downplayed his behaviour to authorities. So that's why they weren't they're not so much on the hook. The police are. The police and the parents are mostly on the hook for this because the agencies, Sir Adrian felt, were not told the truth by the parents as to how bad things actually were.
Yeah, but these agencies are supposed to be professionals. They can see the truth themselves.
But they knew he had knives under his bed. They knew he had knives arriving.
Yeah, but they call in these houses. They know what's going on in these places. They are not naive. They are not naive, but they bear a huge responsibility. Because if they don't take charge of a situation, who is supposed to? I've seen situations around the corner from me where social services have failed completely to help parents to keep little children and teenage children under control, to keep them at home. And it's a failure on behalf of these agencies. They are naive and they are not in charge of their responsibilities.
Yeah, I hear you. I get that they are supposed to cut through the noise and find the truth. But if the parents who were terrorised by their son are lying and saying, no, he's fine, it's just, no, honestly, he's good, we don't have a problem with him at all, and failed to mention the knives and failed to mention the ricin and the violence at home, then I struggle to hold the agencies as responsible.
See, the problem there, Petrie, is that this stuff was already done in school. You'd taken a knife to school. So don't tell me that the agencies in the school didn't know.
But for the last 2 years or so, he hadn't really left the home because he was excluded, wasn't he, from school?
He was excluded, yes.
And so the agencies that would have gone along and said, how's he doing? And the parents would have said, oh, he's great, he's fine.
Well, no, that's one of the problems we have, because exclusion from school deters the agencies from going to see him.
Yeah, it's a good point.
This is not joined up.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. That he then became invisible. He sort of fell off the radar, didn't he?
He did go right off the radar. And I don't think that any parent, despite the ridiculousness of his behaviour, could have predicted that he was going to kill 3 little dutiful children on that day.
No, and I'm sure in their defence that had they even thought for a second that he would do that, they would have reported him and had him arrested and taken away. They sound like actually decent people who just did the wrong thing, to be fair.
I don't think they are ultimately culpable. I think it's a multi-failure again in this society we have of people who can see the obvious do not take any action, which is very sad. But it seems to be common in Britain at the moment. You mentioned America. Now, I don't want to go down the American road if I can help it, because there's a lot to be recommended about it at the moment for various other reasons. But if the only way is to force the authorities to do their job,